But if the village manager, Jeff, if there's a process or something
One
going.
of the things that we're doing now is we'll be bringing the Birdie team back together, because we've looked at a lot of these issues too, as to where we need to be, so we can have a good smart growth and kind of be in line. And personnel in the right positions is a part of the Birdie follow-up that we're going to be doing. Our intentions are to have the first follow-up meeting in June and to continue on so that you guys are ready before your November, when you get back together to begin the budget process again. And we can really have gone through all of those different items, everything from our call for service volume and its affected communications to the road officers to investigation capability. We should have a good roadmap with at least a good 5-year plan from that point.
Yeah, John, the current plan that we have outlined is to complete that evaluation by November 30th of this year, so that we'll have all of that information for the council at the retreat next year. Because John, you may recall that Birdie, we got into a lot of data analysis and realized, there are multiple ways to determine the right size of a police force. And like you said, it's not just the officers, it's the impact on communications and investigations and other segments too. So we use some resources from the Police Chiefs Associations and the ICMA, and we hope to get that done by November for you.
Okay, I think on capitalization for vehicles, certainly we're on a life expectancy for police units. I don't know, it's a 5-year or whatever it is, but I expect there's a replacement cycle that we're on. I had a smart guy come and talk to me and said, what we might do, and maybe this is something that is in progress. You are already doing, but I thought it was a great idea. Is if we're going to replace frontline police units, that we can move those down to the Citizens on Patrol units, which I've been told has a much larger number of mileage on it than the units for the police force. And maybe that's a good way to get rid of or roll out from the inventory those vehicles with lots of mileage on it. So is that something, Jeff and Chief, that's ongoing?
Underway. That's a part of our plan too. We look at all of those totally as one fleet, and we'll roll out the worst, highest cost mileage vehicles first. And you are correct, the COP vehicle is a very old vehicle. We also have some 2007s in the fleet too to consider. But as we roll the new vehicles in and roll those out, we update and replace, and we plan on replacing that one.
Okay. And maybe just a quick question for Walt. Walt, are there small equipments that could be bought? You mentioned one time about getting a Bobcat that you really needed. Right. That would be really helpful. Are there other small things that, again, I'm looking at unfunded priorities, so I'm thinking about priorities that you may have that didn't get above the cut line. Are there things that you could suggest to us that would be really important to help your workforce better do their job, be more efficient, and improve the service to the community?
I think some of the implements that go with the skid steer, which Jeff and I had already talked about, some that were, if we kept the skid steer in along with the 4-in-1 bucket, then we could add to that, as we're able to down the road on each year. I think that's one of the biggest things that we need right now is something that is universal, that we can use not only on ditches and some of these landscape projects, but any of that there is not too big. When you get into a backhoe or loader, you can't get those maneuverable.
Sure.
On paths downtown. I mean, skid steer could even be used on some of the trails or greenways a lot easier than trying to take out there and repair something with a backhoe.
Sure.
So I think the implements that go along with the skid steer is one big item.
Okay, just a comment for Mark. On Friday afternoon, I drove by the Village Hall and I looked to my right in that big park, nice park we have, and I said, man, I got to go back and take a picture of this. There must have been 120 moms with strollers, and this was the Fit for Mom program. And it was a special Mother's Day event that they were having. And boy, there were strollers and youngsters all over the place. And so what came to mind for me was I was looking at the future of the village of Pinehurst here with all these youngsters and what programs that they are going to graduate from when they get from the strollers and they're finished with Splash Pad and the programs that the village is going to offer them. So again, that was just something noticed by driving around the village and observing. This is the second or third time I've seen them. I've seen them over in the village green and spoken to them over. Some will go over to the roast and get a coffee afterwards. So they're very, very energetic and very, very appreciative of what programs and how our parks are maintained. Mark, they told me that. Thank you.
Okay. I think if you have a question about the 100,000 and the additional 100,000, Jeff, I think you can address that because we've spoken about that somewhere.
And this came out of our discussions in the library working group, between John and Judy and Kevin. There was a request by the library to increase their annual operational funding from 100 to 200 starting this year. But we're not really at a point where we can confidently say that that's the right thing to do. There's more analysis to be done, more discussion to be done with that working group. And so what we put in the budget was a second $100,000, but it's not earmarked for their operational funding. It's set aside as a contingency fund that would be applied based on the results of this working group's analysis and then the recommendation that would come back.
So I should look at it, or we should look at it as a placeholder then?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. All right. Kevin?
Just housekeeping, is there an error? Is that why we have this page?
Yes, there was a date on page 4, which is incorrect. It said that we
I'm
were
going to
again.
replace this.
Yes, so page
Oh, okay.
This is gone. And then I wanted, John, I really appreciate you requesting this document from John on what you get funded. It really helps me see the give and take on the process. Makes me see both sides of the process, so.
We've made a note to add that to the jacket next year as a standard item.
Yes, that is real helpful. And because, we're relatively new, I think my input was more about the 5-year financial forecast, which is item 7, so I have nothing else.
Judy?
So I would like to be able to answer the question that Natalie answered about the dollars that are set aside for the forensic. I can't find it in the departmental, I can't find it in the page here on the profile, and nor could I figure out where's the extra $200,000 for streets and grounds. I couldn't find my way, I didn't see anything that bumped up $200,000 on streets and grounds, and I didn't see it in the dialogue except it said it was there. So, I guess I'm interested in having a citizen view. So when I think about the village from the view of the citizen, it's some of the same things John said. There's fire and safety. That's our essential life-saving services that we provide. That's what, the community wants. Next level would probably be infrastructure, roads, streets, ground, stormwater, waste pickup. Those are the things that citizens expect of us. And I did a little cut at the budget, and I'm not sure I'm exactly right, but it looks like we're spending about 50% on those categories. So we look forward to affirming that. But I would love to be able to, because we get asked random questions by people all the time, and how many road miles are we resurfacing this year? So, or lane miles, or however y'all describe them. And it'd be useful for me to be proactive and know that I can look at this and pull that out. And pull that out. So to me, that may be another cut, or maybe I'm talking about the assumptions, but what I sent y'all was the sort of at a glance that I'd love to be able to have this as a snapshot. I looked at Southern Pines budget as an example, and I haven't gone to our benchmark cities, but, somewhere in there, I think, well, this is very attractive and beautiful, but you really can't do a deep dive through all this and come out with, that's the answer for forensics, or that's the answer for street resurfacing.
I'll tell you, over the years too, Judy, we've kind of the pendulum has swung.
Yes, it
you know,
has.
when
I remember when Doug Leppin said, I don't want all that detail, remember?
Yeah, so there was a day when
There was.
the detail sheets that John passed out, I
Yeah,
don't have
these
a.
guys, right here.
Yeah, that was in the actual document. And there was, you could kind of dive into it, you could see the detailed numbers that made up the budget.
Yeah.
Then we started moving towards the council saying, we don't need all that detailed information. We'll provide the general policy guidance, and you can give it to us supplementary if you want it. We can look at it that way. And so that's kind of where we have moved towards is not putting all of the detail of the numbers in here, but working through that in our budget work sessions and providing, additional information and stuff like that for council.
Some of the things you mentioned is just familiarity,
Yeah.
like the
Right,
road
it
miles.
could be.
It's in Power Bill.
It's on page
And
105.
we were
It's
kind
in
of, we were gonna
Power
walk
Bill.
you through some of that.
Yeah, no, that's why I said I
Here
wanted
with
to hear
the
what
Road
you.
mile, what's in there, road miles was what we strive for. It's not
Right.
what we're actually going to do, sure.
5 miles
And,
street.
but then some of the items, like the forensic lab, that's gonna be at the sub-line items detail. That's gonna be down, inside a line item like supplies or equipment. It's, there, with multiple other things. So some of those you may just have to ask,
Right.
Yeah.
to that level. But the resurface, the patching improvements are mentioned, dollar amount, and they're listed in streets and grounds.
Right, but I've
105?
got to triangulate. the
105?
Yeah, find it.
I've got to go find it here and then
That's-
look dollars
That's
there,
what?
but, where's that 200,000 bump? I
Yeah,
don't
it's
see
gonna be
it. I
in
don't see
Powell
that.
bill.
It's on
That's
page
where our
That's it,
resurfacing.
that was my,
Yeah.
that's my one thought, but that didn't really go up that much either, so.
Yeah, it did. It
Yeah.
went from 987 to 1.1 million.
Yeah,
So that's like a million.
it's
I
over,
mean,
just,
that's not 200.
It was 270,000 that you were adding.
it went up $260,000, and the new budget line is 1.1 million. So that was a 26% increase in the funding from last year to this year.
Okay.
It was 17, 18,
Only 200,000 are in Powell bill. The other 70,000
Is in
are in
streets
streets
and
and
grounds.
grounds.
streets
Okay.
and grounds.
All right,
Okay.
okay,
Yep.
all right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
That's
again,
just
it's
a
part,
matter
it's
of
part of the
not knowing
rookie
what it
factor
is.
here, for sure. But also, if I'm a citizen looking at this,
Mm-hmm.
and what are the most frequently asked questions we had? It's sort of like we should have the FAQ,
of
dimension of
resource.
this, so that,
Yeah.
which would be,
In the budget and
It's in the
brief, though,
budget
that's
and
where we try
brief,
to
yeah.
condense down
That's-
those big items. The budget and brief does specifically say we're resurfacing more.
Right, right.
and by
It doesn't
what
say
But-
what department it's in.
Right,
but it
to
says
verify
it's
it,
in
you'd
there.
need
I don't
some
think
more
our,
information.
I don't
But-
think
but
our
that's-
citizens care what department's in. They're looking
yeah,
for the effect.
exactly, they don't care. They just want to know how
And it's
many-
in the budget and brief.
5 miles out of how many miles? And, and is that what 200,000 got me? Was it an extra 5 miles? So now how many total miles are you doing?
Well, I'll tell you what I think I've heard is of interest. It's not how many miles is being resurfaced. I want to know, is my street being resurfaced?
Exactly.
Well, that's the
And I
next
think,
thing.
and I think the
Right.
answer to that is through the staff
Right.
and the maturity of the road, and if there's a 5-year refresh cycle, or if it's going to get not repaved but resurfaced, if the distinction there, I think that's what I've heard. That's what I've heard over my time here. When is my street going to get resurfaced? That seems to be talk about a resident interest. You walk out of your front door and you're going to see that. So I
And we're not even at a point this year where we can
project.
completely answer that. We have part of that worked out, but not all of it yet.
Yeah,
I guess the thing for me is, in my cheat sheet, I got 2 pages here, so if I can condense all of this down into 2 pages, these are the things that I thought were most important for me. And you'll all have a different view of what you think is important, but if I had to put it on a 5x8 card, front and back, what is it I put on a 5x8 card? So that when somebody asks me, what are we doing? Well, how big are we? What's the budget? How much of from last year? Is it balanced? What the hell's a fund balance? And talk about things like that, streets and grounds, programs, what's this special capital fund we have here? That's for the community center. It's things like that I think what you all have done is put together a good document. Then I think it's incumbent upon me and perhaps my colleagues dig into it and maybe come up with our own cheat sheet here.
Yeah, and that's where I was trying.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And Judy, in response to your email and your point about the quick kind of facts thing, we originally designed the budget and brief to be 4 pages because the first 2 years that we did it, we actually mailed it separately to all residents as a newsletter.
Smart.
Just as a way to let the public know what is in the budget. But there are, I think, opportunities for some more condensed reporting and a little bit more detail and information
Granularity,
that,
yeah.
I mean, we could certainly look to, include some of that in the budget and brief, if that's the right place for it, so residents aren't getting bogged down in
Yeah.
that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, we want the Reader's Digest version for the citizens, right?
citizen.
And me. And then I can go dig in it.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that is the budget driving the balanced scorecard, or is the balanced scorecard driving the budget? And so,
Scorecard drives the budget.
so that's great, but that's not, I don't think that's user-friendly consumption for the average citizen. Because how you measure yourself is terrific, but, really back to what are some of the easy things that I get to know and understand. If I'm Pine Wild and I know that I've got a problem with trash pickup, what could I look at here that might tell me, oh yeah, the village could probably do this for me a lot less than what the guy we're using or whatever. So, I mean, I think people will come at this budget with different orientations and meeting your KPIs and things like that it may not be exactly how the average person would want to
Right.
use and consume and seek to understand what's in the budget. And the KISS method just never fails, right?
Right.
Maybe that might not be what Judy's saying, but maybe it's just how do we relate the KPIs better to the public?
It's
Maybe we can stay with
complicated.
our format, but turn it into facts
Yeah.
that they could relate
They could
to.
understand.
Don't go too far off,
Right.
because we literally use the balanced scorecard,
No,
measure everything.
yeah.
But maybe, and like you said, we're not there yet. We still haven't
Yeah.
approved the budget. Maybe there's a way, because we're asked to talk. We're gonna just regurgitate what's on the document, they could read the document, but if we can give them additional facts and how that KPI relates to them, because you should read the KPI and it's so formal. And then you could tell them how it relates to them. What does this mean? And maybe, I don't know, if that's what you're saying.
Well,
but-
I mean, a bit of it. I mean,
Yeah.
in many, many ways, this is an internally facing document
Yeah.
for the village staff, whereas it's really not, I don't think, as consumable by the average citizen looking for information about, I don't really
Right.
care how much money you spend on postage, right?
I think you're right, but I think it's more consumable in this format than it is in a normal spreadsheet format.
Well, I'm not trying to put it in a spreadsheet format. I really want to
Yeah.
make it
Yeah.
useful, at a glance kind of thing.
I would say too, John and I have had conversations, the budget evolves every year.
Sure.
We participate in the GFOA Distinguished Budget Award program, and there are certain criteria about KPIs at the department level in order to achieve that award. So that has,
Yeah.
and there are other award programs through the ICMA that also address how you display that kind of information in your public document.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean there still aren't opportunities to
Yeah.
make it easier
Right.
and better.
And John, I know, and I have, and Kevin probably too, maybe others, and both Johns, I've had a $22 million budget before too. And I've had a couple hundred people and, and organizations.
I've
And
never had a $22 million budget.
well, we're going to work on that for you.
Maybe it's a 10.
Okay, all right. But it's just, it's just how you, as you push it up the, chain of your organization, it's all about distilling it to what's going to be relevant to that audience. Yeah, so, whether that's inside your own team or upward, through your organization. So,
And it should be both.
Yeah.
The document, it should be usable by both of those.
It should be like a pyramid.
It
It should be like a pyramid that we start with the budget and brief. If the budget and brief doesn't communicate the core strategies, the core initiatives, revenue assumptions, and the key expenditures
Key.
in 4 pages or less, then we failed. And that's where we should start, at those key levels. Now, whether we're gonna change how we collect solid waste and pine liability, those are down at a different level. And so, you know, we go from there to the budget message, that's 8 or 9 pages. That's got a little more
more.
condensed.
Yeah.
Then we get to the general fund summary, then we get to the departmental. But
Mm-hmm.
at the end of the day, if we have questions about is a particular item funded, we're gonna have to go, you know, because
Dig
it would
down.
be,
Yeah, and I'm not
Hundreds
saying
and hundreds of
everything was valid, but whatever these top level things are, I just want to be able to pull that string and see all the detail that's associated with that, so that I understand the depth of that a little bit better, all the dimensions and depth. That's what I'm thinking. And then, you know, there will be random things, but there might be recurring things too.
Yeah.
That, and I think they'll mostly affect police and fire and, you know, all the infrastructure. Because that's what the citizen sees and touches on a daily basis. And that's what the orientation I'm coming from.
Okay.
I think the 4-page budget in brief. Did you have a presentation, or are we asking questions before you even make the presentation?
Yes.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're gonna walk through,
Okay.
I mean, their agenda says they're.
Let me just say that I think the budget in brief is the key thing, because it talks about, you know, our priorities. Then it goes down, it drills down into, it talks about how many miles of streets we're resurfacing, it talks about debt, capital expenditures, community center. If people want more than that, I do think that we have a financial transparency center, we have Open Village Hall, we have everything you can think of in the world on our website. So I don't know how much more we can give people,
it
but
might be a good suggestion to link back, like saying, see Powell bill section for more information.
Yeah,
Something
if
that-
I can't
Yeah,
find it.
here, but-
Certainly, I think on the budget and brief, the two, on page 3, the 2 pie chart have, I mean, that tells it all. Where are the expenditures and what are the revenues?
Yep.
Where are we getting the money, and what are, and
Where are we
and
spending
what are
it?
the large things that we're sometimes I worry a little bit about, you can't put the horse to water and make the horse drink.
right.
So how much, my take on this is, I'm very satisfied with the organization here, and I do think strongly there's some civic responsibilities of citizens to get in here and
Come
want
to
to drink
meetings
instead
and
of
want to
so-
drink,
I'm
rather
just
than
commenting
us
as one
feeding.
citizen who's
Sure.
trying, and I'm having trouble. So, and that may be a learning curve issue,
Yeah.
and we'll figure that out. But along the way, I believe we can make it better. And my page, 63, is the one I care about, you know, how we spend our money. So, you know, which is how we're spending it by function. So we all have different priorities.
You know, it can always be made better, and that's what we've been doing for
Absolutely.
15 years under Natalie. It's been getting better every year, so we certainly appreciate it.
So I'm seeking to understand, so
Yeah.
y'all go.
And your comment on the general fund section, that chart by function and department, we've already made some changes there, we'll be showing you here in a minute. So we know there's places it can be better, and we always want to strive to make it better. And a fresh set of eyes sometimes really helps us to see that. So. We did have an agenda that we gave you. Is that your pleasure?
Let's get back to it.
If you want to skip
back
it,
to
you
it.
So sorry.
don't have to decide that you guys opened the book and actually went through it.
Well, we have Post-its here, there, and everywhere.
We, you know, if we give it to you, and that's one of the reasons we did not prepare, or have not for several years now, prepared a separate PowerPoint of any
No.
kind, because we have 170 pages here. Great resources, get familiar with it, you learn to use it, dog ear it, you know. And as much as we can work from here, the better. And if it's not here, then we need to make suggestions for improvements, and that's what we're trying to do. So,
Whereas
if you
Judy
have-
said, pull that string and you can pull the details.
if you have this budget work session agenda,
So sorry.
we'll roll through that kind of quickly. And we'll start with Natalie on strategy.
Is that okay?
Kind of where we are.
Good for me.
Yeah, get back on track.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, that was good. It was helpful. We're going to start with the budget document on page 28. And we're just going to briefly talk about the process. And Judy, some of this might help too, and you too, Kevin, as well, just to get an understanding of what happens behind the scenes on the staff side of budget. So this is our strategic operating plan calendar. As you know, we had our retreat in December. We had balanced scorecard you approved in January. And then really in March and April, department heads worked really hard to pull together all of the detailed resources that would be needed in order to achieve those performance goals and objectives that we've set for ourselves. So this is, again, the balanced scorecard driving what resources do we need in order to achieve that certain level of performance. And so every department head, for all of the operating departments that are included in the general fund section, prepared a set of financial forms. So they gave us detail line item for every account that's on your sheet right here. So, for example, if governing bodies, I do y'all's budget. Not good enough.
Yes, thank you.
Financial services, say for example, John has a contracted services line item. So he gives us an Excel spreadsheet that has the detail. This is bank fees, this is fees to pay Moore County to collect our taxes. Audit fees, all of those fees are detailed. So every department does that for the operating line items. Then we use our internal service fund departments who do the fleet replacement plan. So Randy's responsible for that. Randy and Jeff will work together. All of our vehicles are assigned an estimated useful life. And we say, okay, if police cars are 5 years, which are the 3 cars we need to replace next year? What are the 3 we need to replace in FY 20, 21, 22, and 23? Same thing with garbage trucks, all of our vehicles and our major equipment that Walt has. So the department heads will meet with Randy and they'll talk through and work with Jeff to figure out what does our replacement plan need to look like on the fleet side. And then on the IT side, IT staff maintain a separate IT replacement plan. So all of our computers, servers, major IT equipment, phone systems, AV systems, all of those have replacement life cycles, and Jason programs all of those replacements over the course of the year. So that's really kind of the financial form side of it. And then, of course, we have other capital stuff, and they'll get into the detail of what is actually in the budget shortly. But then if a department head has another capital item that's not a fleet or an IT replacement, there's another process for them to project that for the next 5 years as well. So they'll do that. Then they'll say, okay, if we're really trying to improve in a certain area or move the needle, if you will, in a certain area, I might need some additional staffing. So every department head has the ability to request staff, new staff, in the 5-year plan. They are required to justify that request with either time studies or, what service? Melissa, bring in Himmel.
Personal services here.
Where's that line item? Is that in her job description?
No, she's shaking her head no.
It is not. I asked very nicely. You mind? I said I hate to ask.
I hate to ask.
Filled it up for him, it was empty.
Good girl, thank you.
Melissa.
He needs fuel.
So the department head will work with HR and they'll talk through, here's kind of what I foresee over the next 5 years in terms of new staff positions. They're required to fill out a form that talks about the job duties that would be associated with that position, how many hours in a year, what percentage of their time would they spend on each of those duties. And so Angie works directly with the department heads on that. And then, so that's another thing that they're asked to submit. So they'll do their capital, their operating, and their position request form. In addition, they do a balanced scorecard workbook. So they take every KPI that's in their individual department summary. They project it for 5 years. They indicate what their projection assumptions are. And then we go back and we true up all of those KPI projections based on what gets funded. So they will say, we true it up.
True it up.
Yeah, true it up.
That's what we do in budget world.
Yeah. We true it up. So, for example, if somebody requested some equipment that did not get funded in the budget, well, Randy has key performance indicators in his department that are related to the number of equipment items maintained per FTE. So we go back and we readjust and we clean it all up so that all of the KPIs are in alignment with the resources that are financially allocated. Does that make sense? So we do that. And this year, I'm actually really pleased. We started a new process, in which you guys saw at the retreat, is we asked every single department to get the input from all of their employees about what kind of things they saw on the 5-year horizon and what changes should we make to better serve our citizens. And then they consolidated that into what they thought were the 3 key ones on the list. We took all of that together and we created something brand new, and you don't have a copy of this. This is some of the detail. But this is everything. There's 8 pages of all the departments. These are all the opportunities that they identified, and then we programmed them out over the 5 years. Okay, so they submitted it, and they said, for example, if I think these are the 5 or 8 things that my department needs to do, they ranked them and prioritized them, so they told us what was the highest priority to them. And then we, as a group, as a strategic planning team, pulled all that together and made sure everything was kind of fit in the 5-year plan, to the extent that we were able to do that. So this was a good process for us. It helped us identify, I think, and schedule some major evaluations that we have planned for the, for the next 5 years. And so they give us all that. And John and Brooke work diligently, and they create these big fat notebooks that we all have. And we sit in the room and we schedule 3-hour meetings with every single department head. And in those 3-hour meetings, we go through all of those forms. And we say, okay, what is it you're trying to accomplish next year and in the 5-year horizon? What equipment needs do you have? What staffing needs do you have? What operating needs do you have? And then we go through and we compare that with the revenues that Brooke and the finance department project. And then we kind of figure out what's left, and it all within our fund balance policy, if you will. So all of that, if you're on page 28 in your budget document, happened in March and April. So that's what we did then. We took your strategic direction from the retreat, primarily focusing on what are those challenges that we identified and what are those strategic opportunities that we identified. And then we lined all of that up with the funding request to make sure that the budget that we presented to you addresses those opportunities and those challenges. You may say, I would like to see this one addressed a little more, or maybe I'd like a little more resources here, a little fewer resources here. But we did our very best as a team, including Jeff, myself, and John, and Angie, the 5 of us together pulled all that for you, okay? So that's the general overview of the process that we've been through so far. In the budget work sessions, what we typically do here is we will go through this agenda, we'll hit the highlights of the big stuff that's in the budget, answer any questions. Council will have an opportunity for you to discuss, did we get your priorities right? We checked in with you in April to see if we had, so we want to make sure we were on the right course. And of course, anything is subject to your decision. So that's really what we did, if you're looking at that process overview there. The next section I want to take you to is the strategic priorities section. And that's on page 36. That's where it really starts. So page 36, here's our 9 community goals. Everything starts with this. This is what we are about. And number 1 there you see is safeguard the community, as we've heard from you guys. If you'll flip over to the next page, we include on page 38 the 5-year summary so that you can see at a quick glance what the projected revenue expenditures are for the 5-year period that we projected. Of course, we have a more detailed explanation for the public in terms of how we arrived, what the process was. If you would turn to page 39, because this is the balanced scorecard and all the strategic objectives on that scorecard, along with that table on the bottom of page 39, is really what drove the funding decisions and the allocation of resources. So as I mentioned, we wanted to make sure that the budget that we presented to you addressed everything that's there in that bottom table. And Jeff's gone over those with you at your strategic planning preview and the meeting that was held last night. So page 41 is our balanced scorecard. And this formatted just a little bit differently this year. What we're trying to do is we project our performance over the next 5 years based on the assumptions of population growth rates or whatever the case may be. But we also set for every key performance indicator a goal red flag threshold. Okay, so we may say, for example, we want to be between, let's say, 90 and 95% satisfaction, but we project this year we might be at 97, or we could project we're at 92 for next year, whatever the case may be. But we have a projection, and then we have a goal, and we have a red flag. And the projection falls somewhere relative to that goal and red flag. So that's the differentiation between what you're seeing here on this chart. And then page 42 is our initiative action plans. Do we have copies of that? Do we make copies of this one? No, we haven't. Okay, that's okay. So the initiative action plans on page 42 are the 10 key organization-wide significant actions that we're planning to take. And we've gone over those. Jeff's gone over those with you. I can answer any questions right now about what's included in them, what the cost is of these things, of these individual initiative action plans.
How do you get 10? I see 9.
There's 10. Workforce learning and development is 10, even though it doesn't have any money. Are you on page 42, Judy?
Hmm? But where do you count the 10?
They're in the third column.
Initiative action plans?
The initiative action plans.
Okay, but there's more than 10 there.
Saying only 10 have
There's
money.
10.
There's 10.
Okay, that have money. Okay,
That have
funded.
money.
Okay.
No,
There's 10.
It's the third column.
It's the third
Third
column we're
column.
looking at, yeah.
We're looking at the third column. The objective is the second column. First column is the goal.
correct.
So the initiative action plan is the third column.
Yep.
That's the 10.
Got it.
So Jeff's gone over those with you. I mean, I can answer questions. I
Right.
have the detailed cost analysis for each one of those if you want to talk about those now. I can give you the highlights. The police department accreditation, we're seeking accreditation in FY, I think it's 22. EMS, we plan to design this year, design in FY 19, construct in FY 20. We're going right down this sheet. Comp plan, you're familiar with that. Most of that's going to happen this fiscal year, FY 19. Commercial streetscape enhancements is Magnolia and McCaskill Roads, FY 20 to 23. Pedestrian connectivity are just placeholder numbers after the comp plan, so you'll see those in FY 21, 22, and 23. Street lighting, just budgeted for 10 streetlights. I think it's in 19 and 20 each year thereafter. Recreational and cultural facilities, again, is the biggie, is the community center, as well as the parking down around Cannon Park, as well as Grassy River Playground, and a master plan for West Pinehurst Park on Chicken Plant Road. You guys are familiar with the Birdie improvements for planning inspections. That's primarily software and ongoing fees. We're going to change the name of this one per Kevin's suggestion.
You haven't yet, though, right?
Say again?
You haven't? Or-
Not, well, we haven't changed the document yet, but we will.
What are you going to change it to? I remember it
I think you
was,
suggested just the
What it's called?
Baldrige Performance Framework.
Yeah, what it's called, I thought was the safest thing.
program.
Because it looks like what we're getting inquiries from neighborhood groups that we're paying to apply for an award, when in fact, that is not accurate.
National Baldrige Program. Is that
Program,
what
something
you?
like
Well,
that.
We even,
I named
Yeah,
it,
yeah,
it's
whatever.
before, it just has a name and it's a,
It's the
that's
Baldrige.
a,
Performance framework.
Performance framework.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
It's a
That's even
performance
better,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, National Baldwin Performance Framework.
Yes,
And to me, that solves a lot of the
it
issues.
does.
Okay,
Uh,
so we'll change that.
And
Okay.
there's a cost for doing that, yeah.
Yep. And
It still
then
might not solve everything, but it'll solve.
some of it.
Yes.
And I've sort of described to people as that it's a pretty bargain rate consulting engagement.
It is.
That's the way I would call it too.
A bargain rate.
I mean, because, you know, I look at it, you know, we had a consumer that made a great point. It's whether that much to apply for the award, and I read the whole thing. I came away from it, I'm ready for that question. You know, so, but I think the name has to be changed to what it is for me to deal with it
The
properly.
framework.
Okay.
Just a quick question for Jeff under street lighting. And being a POA number 6 resident, the e-blast from POA 6 says that at the next quarterly meeting, Jeff Sanborn's going to be a presenter.
Yeah.
Cool.
Do you have some just thoughts on the topics that you might want to present? Is this a
Well,
sidewalks and streetlights kind of thing too?
I think there's an opening to potentially talk about streetlights if they want to do that, and I'm prepared to kind of segue on in that, into that type of discussion. But what they asked me to talk about was, it springs from concerns in your neighborhood about the fact that you don't have restrictions and covenants, and there's, you know, what standards can be enforced and what can't be enforced, and so so all you have to fall back on is the village systems of codes and ordinances, and
So can you take a picture of the house next to mine? Send it to you?
Yeah.
I gotta go see that. I gotta go see that.
So that's what they asked me to address, is what we can and do enforce across the village, and what we can't enforce, and,
Good point.
yeah.
Good presentation. Okay.
And then the last
I'll
one.
be, I'm anxious to hear what you say.
Me too.
Thank you.
So you should be fairly up to speed on what are in the initiative action plans.
And there is also, under each of these, in their respective departments, they're more detailed. Like for commercial streetscape enhancements, if you turn to page 104, you will see what streets that are proposed for fiscal year
Right.
19.
Mhm.
You'll see more information on street lighting that year. 104 down at the lower, at the bottom of the page.
They're also right here.
Yep.
Oh, and they're also in the strategy
They're also in the
section.
strategy section, by scorecard goal.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
So as you get to these, there's more detail there. It's just,
Gotta look around.
we may make it add more links to point to those areas.
If you would turn to page 43 for just a second, this is something new. We haven't put this type of information in the budget document before. But we've identified over the next several years the big evaluations that we're planning to undertake, and those are the 3 birdies that we've listed there, and the multiple ACEs, as you can see. We have historically, and I would suggest we continue to have a council member as a representative on these birdie teams. So we're planning to start the fire department birdie at the end of next year. So we think it's going to roll into FY20 as well. Then we're going to move to insourcing solid waste, and this is going to be evaluating our gated communities, and does it make sense to consider insourcing that service? And then document imaging in FY21. So especially you, Kevin and Judy, as new council members, if you'd like to participate on one of these, you might want to talk about that and give it some thought, and then the rest of the council as well.
Sure.
How much do we get back for recycling, about per year?
When you say get back, what do you mean?
Do we get any?
We
We pay to
pay.
recycle.
We pay to recycle.
Oh, yeah. But it keeps it out of the waste stream, which is kind of an
Real
intangible.
quick on that, used to be that we didn't receive anything, we didn't pay anything. But that business model has changed, and we now pay a disposal fee for the recycle. But it is about $20 plus or minus less than what we would pay for that same ton if it went into the regular waste stream. So it is getting recycled, and it still goes
So we
back
are
down.
getting paid.
We're saving.
Cost
Reduction in our
avoidance.
landfill fees of what we would have paid if we did not recycle that ton.
Yeah. There's a big article in today's
Wall Street Journal. Yeah, where municipalities are, China's not taking corrugated cardboard and plastic and reusing, and so they're, the cost for local municipalities is going up. Yeah.
Has anyone seen Our State magazine? They have, this month, they have a big spread on Pinehurst.
Yes.
Yeah.
And there's an ad where you are in it with Mike Apke, I think. I recognized him. But they have a very nice, and actually, I should have brought the magazine. The centerpiece is the roast office and the picture that they took of the postmasters, where you go in and get the food.
Two whistles are in.
And
I'm sorry I didn't bring it.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
It really is a very nice article. Yeah, sorry. Okay.
So
Back to business.
Question about the police birdie. Is that going to look at sending cars home with officers?
Yes,
Okay.
it will include take home.
Okay. So that's
That's not, that's what has
Process?
been done before, so.
It's the E.
It's the E and Birdie.
the what?
Evaluation.
E and Birdie. So we
Finishing the
did
birdie.
the police
Oh,
birdie
finishing.
2 years ago?
2 years ago.
2 years ago, and I think this last January would have meant a full year of implementation.
Right.
January of 17 to January of 18. So January of 17 is when we got all of the staff fully staffed. We had everything transitioned, the new positions in, so we had one full year of data. So we're going back and evaluating, were the changes that we made in the organizational structure, and shifting some things around, and were those effective at achieving what we were trying to achieve?
Okay.
So-
So,
And one of
So
those
that's separate
recommendations-
from this, that's an evaluation of a previous birdie, these are new ones.
But that
So it might
one
be-
recommendation was to evaluate taking vehicles is completed. One of the recommendations within that birdie report.
It was.
That part is
To
still-
study it, yeah.
That is still to be, that piece of it is still to be.
so, yeah, so how do you chicken and egg that, I mean, what, if it's an undone piece of something that was started, why isn't it a to be done in this 5-year plan?
Well, I think the evaluation was completed, and at the time, the decision was not right now, but we're not saying.
Different evaluation.
Evaluation.
We got to be careful about the terms we're using, because
That's true.
Yeah.
the E and Birdie, that evaluation has not been done. The
Has not
analysis was, we made an effort analysis that was inconclusive based on the data that we were looking at. And so, rather than bog down the whole Birdie process for that, the take home cars question, we deferred it as a question to be answered later.
Jeff, I remember you saying that the police just live too darn far away.
So many of them do, and I think it's a complicating factor, yeah.
But I think, retention, with low unemployment rates, retention, carrots are really important to have. And there are so many other jurisdictions. My
Certainly a factor to consider.
lived far away from the county in which he was employed as a policeman, but he took his car home.
Once you take your police car home, can you go out to the grocery store with it?
Depends on the policy, but
I don't
would say
think so.
no.
So what good is it to take it home?
It's a great deterrent.
Oh, I think
Well, it's just a police car sitting in somebody's.
We have a sheriff's vehicle that's right down on Rattlesnake Road down here, and every time I come by, drive by there, I say, "Look, there's a uniformed sheriff there." And from what I've heard from
Deterrent.
residents, they like the idea of having a police car.
And
you
many
know,
people are from jurisdictions where that was a practice, And so I think it's definitely something to consider.
And the consideration seems also, if there's suppose we have a police officer in the village of Pinehurst that resides in Southern Pines, Aberdeen, or somewhere else, if there's a reciprocal kind of agreement about that police unit being residing over where they reside in one of the other cities. So I think there's a little bit of details and coordination, I think, between municipalities. Does that
Yeah,
sound about right?
We stand ready to respond to both those municipalities, and they stand ready to respond to us. And I think
That's right.
to the extent that you might have a ready officer available in Southern Pines, that might help them. I don't know to what degree we actually ever have used the fact that we've got a couple of outside officers living in the Pinehurst jurisdiction. Maybe Earl could shed some light on that, but, our crime rate is so low here that it's not often that we have to pull somebody
We each
in.
other pretty regularly as small departments.
Sure.
Pine Wild, the daytime break-in, Whispering Pines, Chief brought over the dog to help us run that down. Taylor Town kind of picked it up.
The press release, yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
We work together really close, we train together really close. So like
That's
that.
wonderful.
But
You
your
have to.
mutual aid response is the on-duty.
That's the
It's
first
not-
line, yeah.
It's not really the guy that
Off
down the
duty.
street here is
Sure.
on duty, works for Aberdeen, is all of a sudden gonna jump in and
Yeah.
they're gonna send somebody on duty from Aberdeen.
I agree with Judy. I think it's good for the community, and I'd like to think, I have no way of justifying this, but I think it's a deterrent for possible crime to know that there's a,
Well, what's the incentive for the police officer?
Oh, my God. It's a vehicle,
That he gets to drive back
to and from.
yeah, sure,
from work, but then he still has to have another vehicle if he wants to go grocery shopping.
correct.
Yeah,
And he's liable to have
yeah,
one.
but he doesn't have to, it's wear and tear on that vehicle.
Wear and tear on that
gas in the vehicle, and,
Yeah,
Oh, my gosh,
yeah,
yeah.
it's a
okay.
it's a
it's a
benefit.
perk.
Yeah.
It's a
Would it
benefit.
be legal in our PDO since you can't have work vehicles in front of?
Yeah, well,
You might be able to.
Vehicles,
it must be because we have some in our,
You know what I'm trying to say? I'm just trying to relay it back to,
there you go.
I think it's insane, but I just thought I'd say it.
Yeah, that's right.
yeah.
Work vehicles.
But we're all for sanity.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, we are.
back to this page.
But we don't, Earl, I don't think we have,
We have 3 officers that live in the
we have 3 that live in the village limits, but then all the rest of them, they don't generally live in Aberdeen or Southern Pines either. It's all to
They're
the,
spread out. We have
north and west
quite a
here.
few in West End,
yeah.
quite a few in Seven Lakes. I know my neighborhood, Seven Lakes West, there's every chief in the county lives there.
What's the story with that? Is it just a chief cluster?
It-
It is, there's something about Whispering Pines, I
Judy,
can't figure out.
Judy, what page are you
Seven
on?
Lakes.
Schools are good.
43.
It's 7, you're talking 7 Lakes, right? Yeah,
43.
Yeah.
yeah.
But, I think the study we did was, 10 miles within the police department, and folks living about 10 miles from the police department. But if you look at from the village limits, they're
Yeah.
within 5 miles, the majority of them, if you look at that. We
West
didn't
End.
do that, and that's something that we'll be able to look at a little closer when we get the nuts and bolts together, the birdie, we'll really take a look at how many folks do live out of town, and how far really are they? There are benefits, there's cost to everything, there's wear and tear on the vehicles, there's, brakes, there's
That's right, it'll be wear and
tires,
tear
there's
on our
gas, there's
vehicles,
fuel
yeah.
consumption. But on the other side, there's, you're doubling your force twice a day. So there's a lot of things, we'll get through all of that and then kind of give you a good idea of what we determine should be the best thing. But I
All
don't
right.
think we're going to solve it really fast. It's
Right.
something we're going to need to look at.
So back to this page. Sorry, I got this off on the sidetrack, but I would say that it's great to have the 3 that you're going to contemplate this year, but it also might be whatever ones you're finishing up as well too, right? In this 5-year period. I mean, because,
I think that's.
They're still active, right?
yeah, because they're still active, yeah.
Yeah, we habitually stopped listing them in here, even though we never got through with the E, which is you have to implement stuff and then go back and
Right.
study it, so.
Yeah,
That's just a
you could mark them, categorize them, whatever you want. But I think that would be helpful to say, give you a bigger picture of where your focus is.
It would help us not to lose focus on it as well.
And then Kevin and I'll arm wrestle for solid waste, don't you think?
What's that?
You and I'll
You can
arm
arm
wrestle
wrestle
for solid waste.
Yeah,
Bernie?
no leg wrestling.
Say,
All right.
I'm not kidding about that PDO, is a police car allowed?
It is,
It's
yeah,
Richmond Park fire truck in front of his house.
No.
PDO, right?
well.
But I guess what I'm trying to say.
I'm going to say, I think it's okay, because we have officers that, from other jurisdictions that are parking their police cars in the village limits right
Okay,
now.
if you look at the Lake neighborhood, Gun Club neighborhood, there's
I was just
Southern
curious.
Aberdeen,
Yeah.
That seems to be an issue.
Whisper
Presently.
Pines, Sheriff's Department.
Okay, moving right
I'm gonna
along.
pass it over to John
Okay.
to get into the, some of the numbers.
She says enthusiastically.
I'm enthusiastically passing the mouse to John.
Again, there's a wealth of information here. We start at even at the budget and brief, we talk about revenues. Then we get down to the general fund summary. If you want to turn to general fund, page 63. I have at the bottom of this document, the agenda we're going down here. You'll see at the bottom, general fund revenues FY 2019. So the next two sections, we're going to talk about revenues and expenditures for 19 particularly. And we can spend as little or as much time on this. We want you to understand the process we go through and where to find the information. I haven't had one question about revenue so far, so it may be a given that these are, what we've told you so far has been acceptable. But we'll start with property taxes. If you want to flip the page, the facing pages 64 and 65 give the revenue by type, and he also gives the expenditures by function, okay? So we'll be starting with these revenues by type going down here, and then we'll go to page 73, and we'll start flipping through a few pages together, just so you'll know where to find certain information.
Okay,
So 64 and 65 is the summary, the highest level.
right.
Ad valorem property taxes, other taxes and licenses, unrestricted intergovernmental revenue. And this is where it takes a little bit of knowledge to say, well, what's included in each of those?
Right,
Right, but there's a section with each of those names, back in the revenue section, where you can see what is included in unrestricted intergovernmental and what's included in restricted. So it sort of cascades down, okay?
and was the same thing true for expenditures?
Yes, expenditures are a little different. If you'll notice on page 65, you see expenditures by function.
Right,
Flip the page, you see it by type. All these equal 22.5 million. Then you'll see it by department. The expenditure detail is organized by department, not by function and not by
but how do I know,
type.
what's transportation, for
Okay.
example?
Transportation, we prepared a new chart. We're thinking about replacing the one on page 66 for you with
Okay.
this new information.
Okay, good.
Up in the front of the book, it tells you what's in each function. Up in the About Village Services, some of them seem self-explanatory, some are not. So we added this page, a new chart here that gives the departments grouped by function. So see, general government is governing by administration, finance, and HR. Transportation is going to be public services, admin, streets and grounds, and the Powell bill. Powell bill is a kind of odd one because a lot of folks don't see that and see street resurfacing, but that is a North Carolina naming.
Page 66B, I'm calling this.
Yeah, we're gonna
That's what I'm,
66B.
that's
we're
what
gonna try to
I'm,
incorporate that into page 66. It's a good ad to break it down a little bit. It gets a little busier. And how did we get by type? We used to just do it by function. That's required by GFOA. But as reviewers and others over the years have said, I'd like to see it this way. We've added these other two views as well.
and,
Okay.
and one other thing while you're adding, so then like transportation, it'd be good to say that's the 16%, which I don't quite see over here under transportation.
Expenditures by function?
That's the pie percentage. That's the
Right,
percent
right.
change is up there in that column.
Right, but again, if I, to true up my numbers, you got transportation, 16% of our expenditures, but now I get the detail that that's 3.276 million, which is what I wanted as well, or next year, 4 million. Okay, so this is 16%.
It's
Okay.
also up in that chart right there.
Yeah. Page 65 should have. Last couple of years
It does.
are mostly on a slight decline. Folks are terminating landlines. Folks are cutting their cable and going to other services. That may moderate over time as streaming TV services become more standard and folks are paying tax on that as well. So it could come back, but right now we also follow very closely the League of Municipalities. They issue a forecasting memo and we apply that. However, with sales tax, there are local trend that you have to apply. That's local because some of that is strictly local. But we do follow the League of Municipality guidelines to a degree. All right, so that's unrestricted. That's a pretty healthy growth there in sales taxes. Unrestricted intergovernmental revenue, pages 78, 79. You'll see Powellville is the largest one here.
Restricted?
Sorry, I used the wrong.
Yeah, restricted starts on.
79, page 79. The restricted, the biggest one there is Powellville. It's restricted to street resurfacing and some other things that are street related. We use 100% of ours for resurfacing only. Now, some towns, you know, they'll bank this up for years and they use it for things in the streets and grounds department, like maintenance trucks or equipment or salaries, and you can use for quite a few things. We spend this plus 100% more. We spend double this in resurfacing alone, which is not the norm across North Carolina.
Very unusual.
Yeah, most towns, they say, well, that's what the state gives us for resurfacing. That's all we resurface every year. And that's it. So Pinehurst is the exception, and I think that's why we have a great, a better payment condition than a lot of communities our size. So,
That goes right back to Judy's initial question on resurfacing. You know, what we're doing, paying, we're unusual.
We are.
Double what we get in.
Are.
People don't even spend 100%.
Yeah.
I know, and it's,
Well, we're also got roads that were probably put in substandard to begin
Yeah,
with.
we're making up for
We're
some
paying price for some
faulty work.
faulty
Yeah.
installation, cheap installation back in the days.
The dominant
Pre
head.
I wasn't gonna
1980.
say
Yeah.
down there, but yeah.
Pre-1980.
In the 70s.
So it's almost like we're not just resurfacing roads, we're ripping out roads and reconstructing them in some cases.
Back in my audit days, when I audited a lot of towns in North Carolina, the village was my only client that spent more than its Powellville allocation.
because these funds are restricted, there are also very strict reporting requirements that Jeff and a lot of people are involved. IT's involved because of some engineering things. Brooke is involved.
no, I sign something all
extensively.
the time.
You know, did you spend it for what was allowable? And ours is pretty easy, because we say it was all resurfacing, and then we spent that much again in resurfacing.
Right.
So if they ever question one of our costs, we've got plenty more.
Right, you gotta go
Clear,
on.
is gas taxes?
Yeah, it used to be directly tied to the gas tax. So if gas
Much
taxes
fixed.
went up, we got more. If they went down, we got less. But the state broke that connection a couple years ago, and that's mentioned.
So they can take more money.
Second paragraph on the page.
The state broke that connection. It's a direct appropriation now.
It's a
So-
glossary too.
Oh, the
Bill,
North Carolina
yeah.
State Highway
Okay.
Fund.
I'm sorry, I should have read this. Thanks, I got it.
Yeah.
Move on.
Yeah, they broke the connection, and now it's a direct appropriation. Again, it makes it more susceptible to state budget cuts. It also makes us miss out on growth in fuel as more miles are driven across state. But it also protects us
Yeah.
if it falls in a recession. So
Okay, so.
It's been
you'll take
stable.
it. You'll take it.
it's been stable. Yes, the best we could say.
It's based on lane miles and population. So if either one of those numbers go up,
Right,
we get a larger cut.
I get it.
And so the
We're going
growth,
pretty good that way.
Yeah.
Assuming all things are not equal.
That's-
But somebody else is.
somebody else is going
down
as
in
well.
population,
Yeah.
Do we
we're not
count,
going up as quickly as we
Yeah.
are.
we don't count Pinewell streets because we don't maintain them,
That's correct.
Correct.
They're not on the Powellville map.
Population.
population.
I was asking from a legislative standpoint, there's always, you want to improve.
Yeah.
But it sounds like there's give and take, and we're in a pretty good place here.
Yeah, well, I mean, we are spending twice what we get, so it's kind of subjective, but.
Well, I meant it
yeah.
could go down if the
Yeah.
formula was changed.
Mhm.
The way this is, it at least doesn't go down, it just won't go up.
the actual, the per street mile allocation went down $3 this year.
Yeah.
But our revenues are going to go up because our growth in population outstripped that. So,
And how many, I know you'll show me where this is later, but how many street miles do we maintain within our?
106.
106.75, I think is exactly.
So if you turn the page,
Is that right, Walt? That sound right to you? 106.75?
It's in there somewhere.
105?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you mentioned this earlier.
105 is going to be the Powellville department, and you'll see there, it gives the expenditures, shows that growth, and it also shows the revenue change. If there's a related revenue to a department, we try to show it on the page. And up in the text, it talks about our areas of focus for the year. I don't know that it gives the street mileage in that.
Yeah, it's only talked about the 5 miles that we're
Right.
going to maintain.
It's our goal, 5 miles a year.
And as I said, we used to focus these on statistics, and we put a lot of statistics in each department, and now we try to focus on what are they trying to accomplish. So we've been back and forth on that over time.
But-
We got a lot of feedback from reviewers about don't just report number of things that you do, but they
Outputs.
want to see efficiency and as measures. But if there are opportunities to include some of that kind of stuff, we can add that in. We can add it in.
But,
And there are some measures for Powell Bill that are included under streets and grounds. If you go to streets and grounds, their measures are included there.
okay,
Yeah. So all street-related measures are included there. Like our pavement condition rating, our 5-year average, rolling average of roadways resurfaced, the number of centerline miles of roadways resurfaced, that's all in the middle of page
yes,
104.
yeah,
Maintain those roadways. Okay.
spent a lot of time there.
All right, so that's kind of the restricted intergovernmental revenues. Permits and fees on page 81. These are up about 5.9%. This is primarily due to fire district. Fire district is the second largest here, or the largest actually, excuse me, for FY19. Up about 12% there, and that's about $36,000 increase due to the phased-in implementation of the county fire protection formula. The county went to a single countywide fire district rate 3 years ago. They are phasing in that formula. It started out as like 10% phased in, 20% phased in, so they're slowly phasing that in. In a nutshell, that formula is beneficial to the village and will be good for the village overall. It won't harm us. Carlton might speak to that, but overall, we believe we will do better under the new formula than the old.
And I think we already have, and from a revenue standpoint. It also increased somewhat because the county increased the district that we serve slightly. And they do that to kind of balance out insurance ratings in districts and just from fire stations that are going through a big project. That was also bigger than how that handled.
So somewhat like fuel taxes and Powell Bill, this used to be a direct, if someone in our district paid a tax, it came to us. Now it is an appropriation from the county, so it's a little different. But the formula is based on how many firefighters you have, what's your capacity, number of trucks, your response capability, the number of calls you go on. It's quite complicated, but it's beneficial to us because of the level of service that we provide. We've also gotten a bump here because of Taylortown. The Pinecroft Shopping Center bumped their, by contract, we get a percentage of their tax rate. So as their tax base goes up, they pay us a little more to protect those structures that have been constructed there.
Because they have one policeman. Is that why?
This is fire, we're talking about fire
Or fire.
protection. Fire
They don't have
protection.
any firemen.
No.
No, we
Okay.
are their contracted fire,
And
we
we've been
contract with
doing
the
that
county and with Taylor.
Forever? We've been doing that forever for
Yeah.
them?
As long as
Yeah.
I've been here.
But it's a 5-year contract, it does come
Oh,
up for
it is,
renewal, and
okay.
they could at some point choose to do something else to protect inside their city limits. They could choose to do so. However, it's such a small amount that I think there's a tipping point that it's so difficult to start up that
Oh, yeah.
Sure.
it's actually a good deal for them, good deal for us. It's a win.
Yeah.
It's the right thing to outsource.
Okay, it's a win-win. Okay? Assessments on page 83, we won't spend time there. Those are decreasing, we're down to 25,000 a year from that. Just a couple more years left.
Is this code enforcement?
No, these assessments are two special
Oh,
assessments that were
those,
done.
like we had the other night? No.
Ponds,
The ponds,
around the ponds.
okay.
Those were levied in 2006 for improvements to a breach in a dam. And then Cotswold for some storm drainage
Right.
repairs when they were annexed.
Right.
And they had 5 years to pay those back.
Right.
Both of those will be expiring in just a couple years. Yep, they'll be completely gone, and those are winding up. Okay, page 84, sales and service. Again, the detail of what's included. This is where your harness track stall rental shows up, fair barn rental shows up, and your recreation fees are the big chunks here. In this area,
Fair barns.
fair barn rentals are going up, and our stall rentals are down. Now, that's compared to the adopted budget last year, our 2018 budget, so slight decrease there. Hopefully a little better than what we estimate for 2018. But management has taken some steps to address that. I know they have some work plans for next year with some marketing and other efforts to try to turn that around at the harness track. Fair barn continues to do well and is up, and as well as recreation fees are up as well.
Why do we think we're going to have significant merchandise sales increase?
We had,
Actually, it's, yeah.
it's
a
a
decrease.
decrease. The 18
Decrease.
budget, it was
I'm looking at actual to plan, so.
Mhm.
That's probably.
Well, we
not-
started a partial year in 17.
Yeah, 17 was.
That was a startup year, so that's why the number's so low.
Okay,
And we're estimating at the end of this year to be closer to 10,000, and we're projecting the same for next year.
but, yeah, okay.
We were over.
The 30 was a little
It was our guess.
enthusiastic.
Our enthusiastic first year guess.
Okay. Okay.
But we did so well with the Christmas ornaments. We had to reorder Christmas
Oh, yeah,
ornaments.
I had
That was a
to
big
wait.
win, yeah.
Figuring out which ones are.
Where are you now this year? You got, I mean, I'm not asking for specific.
Mhm.
What is it gonna be in
In terms of,
18?
I think
the estimate's
10,000.
right there.
10,000.
It'll be around 10,000.
Oh, it's gonna be, I thought that was budget, the estimate, I'm sorry, it's budget and estimate.
Order more Christmas ornaments. Yeah.
Revenue estimate plus the revenue budget estimate for next year.
Yeah, that's
Everybody
good.
loves Christmas ornaments.
I'll do my part, I'll buy some Logan.
I bought a $30 water bottle.
Just a couple more. We have on page 86, other revenues. This is our ABC. We get two kinds of revenue from alcoholic beverage control in Moore County. We get a percentage of store profits. And then we also get a small portion of the mixed beverage tax. So one, if the, sales at the store are good, we get some revenue from that. If tourism or other, just mixed beverage sales, typically tied to good tourism years, we get a second pot. So those have some modest growth there. Other miscellaneous revenues are listed there. A lot of that's our sales of surplus equipment. And that goes up and down, whether we have a fire truck or dump trucks or different large things that we're selling. So,
What page was that?
86.
Oh, okay.
Second
So,
item.
so it's okay, this is stuff.
And under other, there are
Stuff, yeah.
multiple line items. There's probably a dozen line items in there of small things that we
Okay,
get.
yeah,
It's a flattering term for John.
yeah. Treasures for one, stuff for another.
But about half of that, at least a half of that miscellaneous other revenues is surplus.
Surplus, yeah.
Investment income, a bright number in our budget this year, is up 95%.
Thank you, John.
As we've watched that decline over the years, it's gone off terribly.
Yeah.
We're seeing that come back with the Federal Reserve raising interest rates, more funds available to invest. You'll see in the chart at the bottom of page 87, it's leveling off a little and coming down some. We're expecting several more federal interest rate increases. However, we're going to be spending down some fund balance for the community center. So next year was a bit of a projection. We sat down and tried to project out how fast Mark's going to spend this $4 million and see where. But for 2019, it wasn't too difficult.
Are we constrained, how prescriptive is your investment strategy?
Very prescriptive.
Okay.
The state of North Carolina has a very strict statute on that. It's very fiduciary. We cannot invest in equities
Excuse
of
me.
any kinds.
Okay.
Speculative. It's mostly short-term investments that are approved by the state. Bank deposits, certificates of deposits. And then on top of that very prescriptive state law, we have an investment policy that you'll see each year. We'll come to you and say, we recommend a change or don't recommend a change in our policy, which is even a little more restrictive than
Ours is.
what's allowed under law, like duration. Like we'll say, no, we can't go beyond 5 years. We can't
Okay.
do this. Ours, and it's modeled after other best practices across the state.
Sure, okay.
John does a good job managing that. Every year he goes out and does research and pulls ratings of different agencies and brokers that we use and, make sure that everything is very secure and highly rated.
Keep up their banks, what their star
Yeah.
ratings are. Are they still, doing well financially? That's not required by law. It just says, you can deposit with any bank in North Carolina, but we have a little bit of a higher standard.
We do.
Thank you.
And then fund balance appropriations on page 88, you see a big number there, 4.2 million. We expect to only use about 3.2 million of that because of our budget actual variances that we monitor. And we think we'll end the year at 32.3% fund balance. That's kind of all the revenues. Now, Mr. Bolger, you mentioned the budget's up 12%. The piece I will mention is the fund balance appropriated is high, and the transfer to the capital project fund, 4.1 million is going out. it's part of the budget in the general fund, and you have to appropriate it, and it makes the budget seem bigger, but it's really a it's, is that a transfer or is that a capital appropriation? Well, it's a transfer to a capital project fund that ends up being capital, so kind of keep it in your mind that it's capital. But it does inflate the number.
Right.
The budget would actually be a decrease this year if it weren't
Without
for
that.
Good
the
information.
transfer.
If it weren't for the
Yeah,
transfer.
and I think I calculated it, somewhere here, and I wrote it down, but it is a
That'd be a
decrease.
good number to have.
20-something to 18-something.
Yeah.
That would be good.
20, but then, why did we not put that out there, as a big number? Well, the 20 of this year has a fire engine in it. Do we back that out? There's a lot of one-time things that could
Hard to
skew numbers.
reconcile.
Yeah, right. You
Yeah.
can get down a
Yeah.
slippery slope.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
yeah, it is a decrease. All right, so that's pretty much revenues. If you flip the page on your agenda, we have like 5 major categories of expenditure. And we'll stay right there on page 89, and we'll have to, flip back to page 66 if you like. 66. We'll go through the departments for individual things as we go along. Page 66, expenditures by, no, in your book. 66, original. The other one's not actually incorporated into the document yet. Expenditures by type, not by department or function, but by type. We're gonna kind of roll through those by type. I think it's kind of important to look at this thing from a couple different views. By type, we see salaries and benefits, operating capital, debt service, and then other financing uses. Staffing is almost $10.5 million. We're proposing 141 full-time equivalents. If you look on page 6, Roman numeral, or if you just want to note that, we've already talked about that. Page 6, Roman numeral gives you that detail
Right.
So number.
of the positions, where they're added.
Oh, yeah.
They're also mentioned in the budget and brief. They're also mentioned in the budget message.
Okay.
And they're also mentioned in each individual department where they're added. So it's, those ads of those positions are in about 6 places. So they'll be there, they're in the budget and brief, they'll be in the budget message, and they'll be in the individual departments. Okay? They are the performance management director, and the buildings and grounds is adding a full-time maintenance technician. They've been in the plan for a couple of years. Timing changes sometimes, but those have been ones that have been in the plan for a while. Merit raises are included for employees at an average of 3%, and it's projecting a 10% increase in group insurance costs, which is very similar to what we experienced this year for our group insurance. Operating expenditures of $6.6 million is the next thing there, up about 2%. Some notable things there includes $1.1 million to resurface approximately 5 miles of streets. That's detailed on page 105 in Powell Bill. It funds the long-range comprehensive plan, which is described on page 108. It includes additional funding for street patching, which is on pages 103 and 104. It funds the, no, it says final, but it funds the operating contract. That word final should not be there. Little typo there. Funds the library operating contract at $100,000, continues that funding, and then sets aside an additional $100,000 in contingency for future needs. And there's some detail on that in the library on page 114. And then also the contingency page, 126, has that information about library, what's going on. We've discussed that a little bit earlier in the meeting. So those are kind of the big items for operating. Debt service is declining rapidly, and as of the end of this fiscal year, the village will only owe about $737,000 total. And our debt service for next year is $320,000. There's a lot of detail on debt service on page 127. It kind of just details out the remaining few debts that we have and how they're paying out. And I think by 20...
The last payment is
21?
22.
22?
22 would be our last.
Yeah. And I noted that our interest is only about $22,000 a year. Is that right, Brooke? About $22,000 a year in interest
It's incredible.
that we're paying. So really low cost there. And that says, hey, our tax dollars, our citizens entrust us with, our sales taxes, et cetera, we're putting it all to direct services and not to financing charges the best we can. Other financing uses, this is a governmental accounting term. Basically, it's a transfer of $4,068,900. That will go out to the Community Center Capital Project Fund. There's details of that transfer on page 130. And we'll talk about the Capital Project Fund here in a minute, so we'll spend some time on those pages when we get there. So that's the other financing. And then capital expenditures. If you want to turn to pages 131. Capital is a little lower this year, but on page 131, at the very back of the general fund section, there's about $1.1 million in FY19, about 5% of expenditures. You've heard us say before we like to spend something like 10 or 11, but we also have this $4 million transfer to capital project fund. So, direct, if we had to say measurable by accounting standards, we're only spending $1.1 million on capital, but then we're going to have this capital project fund, which is multi-year, but we'll bump our total capital spending up this 1 year significantly. Page 131, you'll see our capital expenditures by year there. Now this chart includes all funds, so just over $5 million there.
This is fire trucks and everything, yeah.
If you flip to page 132, 3, we're going to provide item by item in each department what makes up that $1.1 million. It may answer some of our questions regarding capital. I'll give you a few highlights here. Storm drainage projects, about $160,000 in total. They're under transportation there. Starts with Lake Forest Drive, Glen Abbey, Azalea, and Shaw. Oh, excuse me, and Azalea. Those are the ones. And then the small drainage projects of $75,000. About $160,000 for drainage, and that's pretty close to what we spend each year, isn't it, Jeff? I mean, that
Seemed like there's a little bump
little
this
more?
year.
It's a little higher on because of the specific projects.
the village is
Small drainage is about the same.
about the same. Yeah, the village has had a pretty strong commitment over the last decade to funding drainage problems, incrementally over time, addressing the worst areas.
I'm not following what you just said, because you had much bigger numbers than.
Okay, if you go to transportation, small drainage projects, 75,000.
Okay,
From there down to Azalea Road, I added those together
okay,
because that's our drainage related, and that's 160,000
okay.
for those. That Shaw Road, Marshall Park is an additional small sidewalk.
Okay.
How do you handle the Bouldry pop-up stormwater runoff project?
Those are handled in the operating budget. So we have two pots for small drainage projects. These are those projects that rise above $5,000, that are miscellaneous, that pop up. Then we have in operating, we have about $60,000, I believe, for projects that land under $5,000. So from operating in a budgetary standpoint, they're both in the streets and grounds budget, but one part of it shows up in capital, part of it shows up in just the regular operating line.
Okay.
And based on that $5,000 threshold. And then when we get to these named projects, we consider these medium to large storm projects, we budget them individually because of their size and cost.
What do you call those things in your departmental budget?
Same thing, small drainage projects.
Okay,
So in the operating line item,
Oh, they'll be under contracted services.
Contracted service.
contracted.
Contracted services.
Okay.
We'll hire a contractor.
not to say, yeah.
Okay,
In our level of detail, it's specified,
so contracted,
but it's under contract services.
okay. So these are planned contracted services and storm emergency kinds of things.
So 5,000 is a cut where we add it to our capital assets and
Right.
depreciate it over time, and that's where
Yeah.
the auditors
Okay,
are
got it.
allowed to do that.
So, my understanding that's right, we have 160 in named projects over 5,000, we have another 60 in
Under 5,000.
contracted services that are under 5,000. So there's 220 in total
Or
for
60,
stormwater.
Out of,
or 60 total in stormwater if you include this.
yeah, 357 is the contracted services total, okay.
There's other stuff in there.
Yeah, I get, I can
Oh, yeah.
imagine. So when you capitalize it, then are you depreciating it and that's showing up in the operating budget? Or is that always in your capital?
Appreciation.
Yeah, it's going to be on the government-wide financial statements. We do depreciate, and we do have depreciation expense on our government-wide financial statements. It's not, it's allocated by
It's not in the
function,
budget.
not by department. And we don't have to budget depreciation. It's not budgeted.
there's not money going out the door to pay for it.
Right, okay.
It doesn't show up in the general fund
It
anyway.
does show up in the village's net assets calculation, but that's not,
It's not generally
It's not
accepted
budgeted.
accounting principles for government to budget for depreciation expense.
It's just part of your asset.
Yep.
We're replacing the Fair Barn dance floor
Again.
again.
People are dancing.
dancing going
Keep wearing it out.
What'd you say?
Shaggy.
Keep wearing it out.
Yeah.
That's a good thing.
frequently rented, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mark, what do we rent the dance floor for generally? How much? You know,
$300, $280, $300.
$300 for the whole thing.
$300.
The dance floor, to rent the dance floor.
Practically every event outside of corporate weekday stuff uses it. So
And
it's probably 3 times the use of what a rental company uses theirs in a typical year. We've checked with them to kind of ask why is ours wearing out so much, and that's what they
She
said.
uses it
They're
so
using it way more than we do, so.
How many times does it get rented a year?
I'd have to go back to that.
50.
Probably every wedding, reception,
Most events.
every prom.
It's 50 to 60, I would guess, at least.
We've got 52 weekends and Friday and Saturday night, almost all Friday and Saturday nights are full, so at least 60 or $18,000.
Yeah, we've paid for it many times over since we
Yeah.
bought it.
So I was,
That's my point.
Yeah, and we'll pay for this one.
It gets paid for
Probably
pretty
the
quick.
first year.
We get it paid back
Quickly.
at least pretty fast. And then we get into the black one.
now, in the budget brief and in the message, we highlight the large capital. I'll mention a couple more here that we mentioned in those sections. The sewer jet and vacuum trailer, if you look on page 133.
Like this.
There's two different pieces of equipment. We kind of mention them together because they're for cleaning out storm drains. That's $110,000 to improve our capabilities in that department. And then we didn't mention it because it's not over 100,000, but the skid steer and loader and brush cutter are also included right above that. Paving the Cannon Park.
So this is really just for storm drains.
Yes,
Well,
Have we ever thought about leaf pickup?
we have. Yeah, I'll let Jeff talk about that.
My neighbor drives me crazy with leaf pickup. Our neighbor.
So, let me clarify a couple of things. Which question we were talking about for storm drains? The skid steer?
The vac
No,
trailer.
the back trailer.
Okay, the vac trailer and Jeff are for cleaning out storm drains, pipes, catch basins, and the like. Right now, we do it manually. If a basin is full, we're down there with a shovel.
So I've seen you.
I think what she's asking is, can the vac trailer be used for leaves?
4 leaves.
It's probably single purpose.
It's
Not
usually
magnolias.
conjunction with- It's
Oh,
usually
completely
conjunction
different
with
thing,
liquid, I believe, under this.
And so then separately, have we ever thought about, a lot of neighborhoods, come around and, in other communities, come around with put your leaves out to the road and then we'll come suck them all
You
up.
did a birdie on that, didn't you?
We did, and we elected to not go that route. Couple of reasons. Equipment costs are fairly significant for only being used a very minimal amount of time during the year. When they do get pulled out, we just didn't think that was probably the appearance that we wanted to see in the village of Pinehurst, and then the wind blowing them across the street. You get the dead area where they put the stuff. At the end of the day, we elected to go with the carts, which are hard to, obviously, if you've got a yard with a lot of oaks, you're kind of restricted. But that's part of the plan, was to restrict people to a certain number, because we pay per ton of yard debris, including leaves. And so it seemed to be a little more fair to try to cap everybody at a certain level, and then if you're above that level, then you need to get some supplemental help, or we open the yard at the public services yard twice a year where people can bring it in and just deposit it there. So that's how we ended up there. John, I believe you were on that parade, John Cashin.
Yeah.
Um,
And if you have a yard service, they're required to haul the
there's
stuff
fine
away.
haul away as well.
Yeah.
It can be done. I mean, it's a vacuum truck, but it would sit probably, 10 months out of the year, 9 months out of the year, something like that.
Might be
Like
another
that.
vendor situation.
We looked at all of the, we looked at, I can't tell you how many different options relative to picking up yard debris. Well, of course, and we were looking at it holistically, and then we looked at fall specifically. Frankly, we don't get that complaints anymore. We did first year, but I don't think after that, those people.
Well, I think, yeah, I mean, I think, your fall leaves, but I think magnolia leaves drop all year long.
Oh,
And there are just lots of places that aren't as conscientious about getting them up that I think slightly.
we do maximum on yard debris carts. Is it 3 allowed? 3 is allowed per house if you so want to purchase the extra 2. Once you buy them once, we'll empty them in perpetuity for free.
Once
So-
a week, though,
Yeah, once a week, but you can put 3 of them out at a time.
yeah, if you have
If
three.
you've got a large yard.
It's, if your phone's not on airplane mode and it's trying to get data, it's gonna
I was on that
make a
team with
noise.
Jeff.
Mhm.
Yeah, I was on that team with Jeff too. Wasn't it the fact that we didn't have curbing in many areas that was also a
Yeah.
drawback?
That's a good point. Thank you for pointing that out. Without curb and gutter situations, many times these would end up in the ditch line where the stormwater is supposed to be flowing to. So
Right.
that was another
Or
consideration.
when they were vacuumed up, the pine needles, if it was a natural area, you get vacuumed up as well down to the
Yeah.
dirt. So there was
Hard to segregate them,
Yeah,
yeah, I
a little
understand.
bit of a challenge.
Yeah, okay.
We've got we're an urbanized community with a rural city when it comes to our movement.
Yeah, that's my drain by the restaurant. I mean, we watch it. It's all leaves and sticks.
Yeah.
Stormwater drains, leaves and sticks, leaves and sticks, leaves and sticks. Nobody's living there. It's the trees.
So then, we've contracted for some of that sewer jet work this year as well. It's not cheap. So when we have to bring someone in to do that, it's not cheap, and we've been weighing that for a couple years and watching, because it's been requested before. And that's sort of a mode, if something's requested, maybe we rent it for a couple years, see if it works. How much does it cost to rent it per year, compare that to depreciation and maintenance and owning it yourself? And then we ease into it, and this year we made the tipping point for those 2 pieces to be purchased.
It benefits the harness track as well for the stormwater projects that keep the water off the tracks down there.
And some of that ongoing maintenance of
Yeah.
those structures that
Yeah.
are down there. It's
If you
$450 an hour for that truck to come here.
If you did get it, you'd focus fully on the things that block stormwater, not beyond that.
Yeah.
It'd be confusing to the public a little bit.
How do you monitor storm drains for
When they need to
time
be cleaned out.
when there's a need? Yeah, is there, are you cycling through the village? Because
We want to get to that point, but we are not to that point yet. We do at times get into that mode, and then it seems like we get pulled away, so we are a little more reactive than proactive in that arena. What we are hoping is that, having a piece of equipment that will help us get in and out faster. That's one of the issues. I mean, once we get to one that is clogged, it takes us a pretty good while to get it cleaned out when you're doing it with a shovel. This will zip right through it. The other component there is getting our systems mapped properly and able to manipulate that mapping on a GIS computer system. We're working right now with IT and Withers Ravenel on a GIS solution for the village as a whole, but specific, we've got a component in there for public services, and Walt and I just met with them about a week and a half ago, I guess, and talked about that specific need, that we really need to be able to GIS locate all of our structures and each have its own identifiable characteristics, numbers or whatever, and then that we can go in and document everything we do on that one, so we can begin to see the history of different problem areas. Right now, those are identified, some of the steps in. We know which ones we need to go back to about every 3 months, 4 months, and we know which ones we can probably get away with once a year. But that's mostly right now in their heads. So
is there a higher seasonal demand in the fall or in the winter if there's snow and leaves come down, or is it pretty level?
It's the storms and the amount of rain. Normally, before any rainstorms are coming in, like we're getting a lot of rain supposedly this week, I'll send guys out on east and west, and they'll basically check mainly for the mouth of the, catch basin or something like that. If a lot of buildup, they'll stop and take all that out, put it on the truck and bring it in. So we do a random, quite often, but normally it's when the storms are at their peak or we get a big surge rain. You get a lot of overflow that goes in some of these. Like Jeff said, over the years, we can almost identify where their main locations are, and some of them we never have a problem with.
But I'd like to get that in a GIS system so it's outside of our heads.
Get enough in your head?
That would be good.
Right.
That's just what that's for, too.
I made a little cardboard boat one day when I first opened the pub in the alley in a big rainstorm. It ended up in Marshall Park.
Really?
That's how far.
Marshall Park?
So it ended up.
How'd you find it?
I followed it. I wanted to know how far I would go.
Can you see
The
Calvin?
drain was there in the alley at the time, but the drain was clogged, and really that exercise made us recognize what the problem was. That drain got clogged, so we manually freed it.
Did anybody see you following this little boat? Did anybody
It was
photograph
a silly
you?
exercise, but at the time,
No,
I was
really, it
scared
was,
the water was gonna come in the building. It hasn't,
that was a good
we
thing
have
to do.
sandbags in case. So
Talking about, problem areas, that drain is behind the old library building.
Right.
It is undersized and, but it runs across the library property. It's not technically ours, but it's one that we do go visit time to time. pull
Because
free
it
off.
comes into the,
Yeah,
Well, it
Feeds
comes
the whole
around,
downtown.
comes around by Drum and Quill, and then goes down the alley, and then it hits a box, and the box is undersized, and the pipe is undersized, but from there, it goes down along the lawn of beside the old post office, and eventually it ends up in Village Green. But when it's clogged,
it goes.
it bypasses that and goes toward Marshall Park.
Yeah, but, well, all the Chickapin Road drains down the alley.
It does.
So it's interesting, that's not one of yours, when literally all the main,
Goes to a small, undersized drain.
anyway, you guys
are we gonna
tackling
fix
it
the
one by
small
one.
undersized drain? We're gonna
Fix it
fix
up
the
and fall
small
grade.
undersized drain?
We have talked about it on multiple occasions, but it's not on village property, and we don't go on private property and fix people's drainage problems, even though in this case, it can back up to where it finally gets to our property. So it's kind of a gray area.
Yeah. Could be a new drain too, but that's you guys call.
Well, we would have to put a new pipe in across, from that back alley, across beside the old library building, and tied in to the system. But where that water originates into the drain, drops in the drain, is on private property, and all of the piping would be on private property. We just don't normally go and fix people's personal private drainage issues, unless it's backing up and causing a problem to us, and then we can partner with them. So that's kind of where that
It
is.
sounds like you're tackling.
I'm aware of
Elephant
how to
one bite
deal
at
with
a
it.
time. I understand.
So how
Go
much
for the
would it cost
partnership,
to fix
Kevin.
it?
Now that I understand what to do, I think I'm able to stay on top of it, clear that drain out.
New box, probably another new box, piping, probably in the neighborhood of $50,000 to $75,000, I would guess.
Not unlike what we did down here with, on the brewery.
Right. That was what, 80?
It is a little before 4. There's a funeral I want to go to on Wednesday at 2 o'clock. Roe Park's funeral. Yes, isn't that our next? If we stay for another hour or half an hour, do you think we can get through all this?
I've got to get to a viewing in Durham, so.
Oh, dear.
At 6, so I'd be gonna have a little more time, but I probably can't.
Maybe half an
Say
hour?
30 minutes, yeah.
Do you think we can, be finished by 4:30 and not have to come
Sorry,
back?
got off on a tangent.
All right, we were on
Roe
Capitol.
Park,
Capital
Yep,
project.
we're on Capitol, item E3.
2 o'clock, Village Chapel.
I want to explain we've got the Cannon Park, we've talked about the Cannon Park parking lot, but it's really the Cannon Park / Rattlesnake Trail, that. So
They
if you
just
want-
did it, didn't they?
well,
Wait a
no,
minute,
this
oh,
is
the
on
other
route.
one.
On the road.
By the old pool, between that and
Yeah.
the convenience store,
Yeah,
that's
They
that
just did the
lot.
other one.
That's coming up. And then the Wicker Park playground equipment, I just want to mention here that is actually a larger dollar project than what is indicated in the budget. It's about a $140,000 project,
Playground replacement?
Yeah.
playground equipment. Yes, it's about $140,000 to replace that, but Mark, the idea is to partner with the temporary school. They were gonna build a playground, instead of them building one, get them to use their funds to participate. It's not all completely ironed out at this point. It's a plan.
Yeah.
To
Great.
get a $140,000 playground
Heard
for
you say that
95.
the other night.
Absolutely.
Okay? All right, capital project fund. Let's turn over to page 134. These two pages give you some information on the community center capital project fund. We established this fund last year. It will be the recipient of the $4,068,900, be going in with funds that are already in there for design, to give you on page 135 a project of $4.4 million.
Yep.
And that's what capital projects are funds are for. They are to accumulate multi-year, multi-million-dollar projects so that at the end you know what the whole thing costs, and they don't close at the end of each year. That fund was opened this year in the fall in October, and it will stay there for probably 3 fiscal years in total before it's completed. All right? You'll see at the bottom of 135, y'all spent lots of time on the operating of the community center. This is a summary of the same information, the revenues, impact over the 5-year period, and the salary and benefits, operating, and the reduction in costs for the lease that we're paying. So kind of a summary format,
Yep.
but probably the most detail is in this document.
On 135.
135, bottom of the page, impact on operating budget.
So these are all the, so over time, we're gonna save $104,000 on leases. Just- Well,
Yes.
no, is this because these are coming out of duty, or what? How do I
The reduction
interpret
in
that?
lease expense is no longer renting the rec.
That's the rec room cost.
Okay, but, okay, and you're showing it annually, because if you still had it, you would.
If we didn't build this, we'd still be doing it.
Right, okay, I'm just trying to wrap my brain around what you've done here. Okay, so then, so the operating cost of the community center itself is $101,000. Is that right?
In addition to salaries and benefits
In
changes.
addition to
Right.
salary, yeah.
And then, so I think, so this is sort of odd to me to show in the savings of the leases that you're not having, because those leases have expired, right?
Not
That's
yet.
prescribed by, that's
By
the
GFOA.
GFOA Distinguished
Oh, really?
Budget Award says you
So
must,
you have to show.
yeah, if you don't show your revenue increases, what impact is this gonna have on you if you didn't do it or if you did do it?
They ask you to explicitly
But to-
detail reductions in operating costs as a result of a capital project. They specifically ask us to define that, so that's why it's in the table.
And just odd. Okay, so let me just,
Well, you get both numbers, though. You get the operating
oh,
cost
no,
and the
I
net.
understand that, but it's just odd to keep having it show up as an annual reduction.
Savings.
I mean,
If we didn't build the center, we would enter into another 5-year
Every
lease.
year, then we'd be spending that on that lease.
It doesn't say that, though. It says total operating cost is the larger number. Net operating impact is what it says, and that's accurate.
Impact on operating budget.
Yeah, we're trying to define the net impact on the
no,
operating.
and I understand this was the crazy number that I could never get my head around in that other little one pager, but you built this building and now you're going to be using it for all your services, but you still report on the fact that you had an old lease that you aren't going to be using anymore?
There's no shovel in the ground yet.
Yeah, if you didn't rent this, you wouldn't have these additional revenues and you would have this additional cost. If you didn't build this center, and you have it every year. We've had it every year before,
So where are the incremental revenues?
across the top line.
Top line.
That's the increment.
That's only incremental.
Our revenues
That's
for recreation
just
fees are like
incremental.
300,000.
Okay, so why don't we show, if you show the money you're not spending on the lease, why wouldn't you also show the other revenues?
What other revenue?
Because there are revenues that we would get whether or not we have the center.
Correct.
Same principle.
So what is the objective? In
Net,
this-
net
in
impact
this-
on our
The
general
net-
fund.
The impact on your
The
general
net
fund.
operating impact on the general fund as a result of that capital.
And
So
so,
the net impact is it will increase our revenue by that amount. It'll increase salaries by that amount, it'll increase operating by that amount, and it'll also reduce the need for that lease by that amount.
So, and so it's all, so all this is incremental stuff minus the lease expense. So incremental salaries, incremental rec fees.
Even the lease is incremental.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is.
It's the change that's brought about by the fact that we're gonna build this center.
It might be easier to think if we took all of our leases together and showed you what we expect to spend in leases for the next 5 years, it will be lower in every year of the 5 years. If we build this center, it'll be higher, but if we took all our leases and rentals and put them together, does that help anyway?
A little bit, but what about a car? So you buy some equipment, like Earl was talking about, we take that, a police car, and when we age it out of service, we give it to the Citizens Patrol Group. So how does that show up?
Are we
Does
talking
it-
in
do you-
relation to the community center?
No, in terms of capital expense.
Capital?
So you're not using that vehicle anymore for your police force, but you're giving it to an auxiliary group.
It'd still be in the police department's asset
Public safety.
lists.
And so when you dispose of it, and you get
Surplus sale.
surplus
sale
sale,
goes
and
into
that shows up in the other
miscellaneous
stuff.
revenue.
Yeah.
Other revenues, yeah.
Okay. But you don't have to, okay.
But that is not, that's a capital expense, that's different.
Well, that's what this is, right? Aren't we in the
This is-
capital project fund?
This is a little different. This is a capital project fund, but part of the GFOA Distinguished Budget Award Program says you must show the net impact on your operating budget. If you're going to build a new building, some folks don't put anything in for operating. They just put in the capital, okay? And that's a bad budget because then it's going to increase their operating costs and change their revenues over time.
Okay, so let's just say I understand this.
Okay.
And so then my next question would be, where do I find the snapshot of the operating cost for the
Instead till 4th,
community center?
come back Wednesday.
Bottom of page 135. The operating cost is the 5th line down.
You want the detail of that?
No. I just, so as I understood it, recreation fees here is incremental, salaries and benefits is incremental.
Yes,
And the operating costs are incremental or directly tied to the community
it
center.
is.
Okay, so then where do I go to pick up the rest of the revenue and the rest of the salaries?
The recreation department page.
Budget, okay,
On
Okay.
page
okay.
112.
Because this is just showing the impact, the additional.
Right.
It's not all
I
recreation.
understand.
Yeah, sorry.
Well, and
But
you
that's what
notice
it's
on page
intended to do.
On 112, there's really not anything because it hasn't been built yet. See, notice these costs don't pick up till 2020. It's a very small amount.
Right, I mean, but if I look out in
Next year.
2020, I'd see it, yeah.
That's where it should show up in the future.
Right, so, but we don't see 2020, okay, got it.
Because this is a multi-year fund, it's trying to say, looking to the future, 5 years, what is our best estimate of what kind of financial gain or
So
loss?
there's really no picture in here of what I'm asking. So once this is in operation,
But page 135 is the best picture we have, and that's what we detail for you at the council work session.
no, I understand that.
Okay.
I had a problem getting it then, and I'm a little bit better now. But now I'm saying that in 2019, you're gonna have $205,000 of revenue. And
I
You
think,
know what may be helpful, if you turn to page 142, the 5-year financial forecast,
yeah, that's
I
what
think the numbers that you're asking for are embedded in this statement. So the recreation fee projections, the total recreation fee projections are gonna be sitting in that, is that current sales and services? It's gonna be sitting in that sales and services number. That's where it is. And we
Okay.
have the detail of that,
okay,
um,
but that's.
but that's where it is.
And that's an example of a citizen question we get, like, what is the cost of the community center? And so this net cost, while I intellectually understand it, and you can even follow it arithmetically, it doesn't give the answer that most people would be expecting.
Well, if you said the
In
cost of the
2020.
community center alone, that page 135 is the 100% best guess of the cost of the community center.
Well, no, I don't mean, I don't mean it as in, what is it costing to build it? I mean, what is the cost center for this in the future? You know, which is, I think, what this is. You know, but so if I could add on the ongoing recreation fees that you expect to increase over time and the ongoing salaries, then when I look down, it'll be 100 and I'll even net out the lease part, but now it's going to be some number well over 110.
And I think what you're asking for is we don't currently organize it like that. So in terms of the forecast that we provide, what she's saying, I think, Judy, correct me if I'm wrong, is if you were to take the cost center of recreation and project it forward, both the revenue side and the expenditure side.
And they'll see it in future years, just
You will
19
see
is
it.
an anomaly because it's the monies, the big dollars are there to build the darn thing, but then now the dollars to operate it and run it in the future aren't in this number. We'll see it in 2020, in 2021.
But we think it's gonna be
Different
between
ones.
101 and 110,000 a year to operate it. That's the operating.
Yeah.
The problem, though, is if you go back to the recreation section in the general fund, this gets lost in the bigger set of numbers. I mean, unless you call it out in this detail and put this here,
If someone asks me.
nobody's gonna know what the cost of this center is.
Someone asked me, I'm gonna use this exact graph to explain it to them. And this is the exact thing that describes the incremental increases in revenue and expenses. So, if you embedded it like Judy's talking about, it would get lost in the Parks and Rec budget.
I'm not asking it to be anywhere, I'm just asking to understand. That's all I want
Yeah.
to pull it out, so I could articulate an answer to someone. But this, I think people would still be asking my question. Is this, yeah, I get the incremental, but what are we spending now?
Well,
You
yeah.
know.
That's
You
the
could
budget.
say in 2020, the first year of operations, it's gonna be $163,000 to operate it. However, that's offset somewhat by a lease we're gonna be able to
What page?
forego. 135,
Okay,
2020 column. So you could say that it's gonna cost $163,000 to operate it. However, we'll get additional revenues and we'll get to forego a lease. We'll get to close that lease out without renewal for a net cost of about $102,000. So 160, but the net cost is 102. That's the answer. I mean, of the what it's gonna, if you said, what does it cost to operate it year one, it's $163,000.
Can you two take this discussion at another time, so maybe we can move
yeah, I'd be
on,
happy
we
to.
can move on?
Yeah, it's-
Let's move on.
All right, so then we get to the 5-year forecast. One more tab back. This is page 136. This was something we added 3 years ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago. Again, at the result of some of our reviewers asked for this. What this does is we always did a 5-year forecast. We always were doing it. We didn't have a separate section for it. It ended up inside the CIP.
right.
And just said, well, if we adopt this CIP, the operating and the capital, this is what we think it will do to our financial position. This formalized it. It talks about the purpose, the methodology, the revenue forecasting, the operating expenditure forecasting. So pages 136, 137.
Oh, I'm
On
so sorry.
138,
I usually go with this.
138, you have, begins with the significant assumptions that are made in this 5-year forecast. Every forecast has assumptions. A lot of these flow right out of our single-year budget assumptions for revenues, et cetera, but also for expenditures. Page 139, you'll see the planned capital expenditures. So this is kind of a culmination of the CIP, new capital that's coming on that has operating, results for FY19, and then where we think this will carry us over the 5 years. Okay, if you flip the page, it culminates in page 142. Let's turn to page 141, 142, and I'll just pause here just for a minute. This is kind of like the most important document for the financial people and for managers. They will look and say, where is this plan? If we implement this plan as we expect, the 5-year capital, the 5-year operating, the 1-year budget, where will we end up? We talked about it, there's a lot of focus on our fund balance at the bottom of page 142. And also in the chart on page 141. If you look at page 141, the chart kind of tells the story. The amber bar there in the middle shows the 30 to 40% of total expenditures that we'd have in fund balance at June 30th. Okay, so we gotta remember, it's a measurement date of June 30.
Snapshot.
It's a snapshot. And this shows us bouncing around in the 5 years just above that 40% number, okay? As I've explained this to management, as we've discussed it as a team, we said, and we've even had citizens comment at the last meeting about being outside or above our fund balance target. There's a couple things we need to take into consideration here is that the numbers at the bottom here range from 32 to 44.5. I personally pulled out the $1 million that we expect to come back. Natalie, let's scroll up here. You'll see in revenues, right here, this number gets big. You see that this is the $1 million coming back from in 2020, and I think Jeff, you pointed this, you highlighted this in your presentation of the message. Just to remind us, that $1 million coming back. We never planned, we didn't show that in our 5-year forecast till we got a little closer. So we weren't sure if they'd meet their targets, if they'd be able to accomplish it, you know, how that might go. We're actually showing that coming back in fiscal year 2020 now as a plan of revenue. So that is inflating our fund balance in those years, okay? So that's one factor that we need to be prepared for in our fund balance. So this 44.8 here, without that $1 million, would be 39. And then it would range out to about 39 again out here. So if we pulled that $1 million out and we said, the council has elected to dedicate that and commit that to another library project in the future, matching funds,
Right.
capital needs, et cetera, it would put you back at 39 on your general fund. So we have to keep that in our rearview mirror, keep that in our mind here as we're going forward. Then there's a comprehensive long-range plan. We have $1.2 million in here for some sidewalks or pedestrian facilities in some out years. There may be other items that come up, capital needs that the plan identifies. We need to be prepared financially to address those. And then the last piece was,
I think that's it.
okay, library, yeah.
Yeah, but the library question
Oh.
might even be bigger than that $1 million.
That's the second.
Library, potential increase in library operating expense, and we don't know where this discussion is going to go with the library, and what the working group might come back to the council with a recommendation for, and what you might or might not approve as a way forward with regard to the library. But, you know, the top end of that might be building a new facility and running it ourselves, which is a huge capital expense and a huge operating expense that we don't know what's going to happen yet. So
Correct. So this is kind of the three: library capital, library operating,
Yeah.
and then comp plan capital, and maybe operating. I don't know what could come out of that potentially, but we were glad when we did this plan last year. We were hitting 29 in the first year, and that's a little nerve. You know, that was the borderline. 29 was kind of we were going to scrape the bottom, and we were glad to see that come up 3 percentage points this year, and avoid the debt, which freed up $100,000 to put toward that $100,000 of operating for the community center. So
Right.
gave us a little more flexibility.
And in the past, when you were socking away money for the community center, what was this, how did that affect this general fund number? It
Well,
didn't?
it got up to, right now, up around 50. Yeah, so we went up. Now, we could have, and I mentioned this in my quarterly reports, we could have officially asked you to commit that and pulled it out and said, we're not going to count that anymore when we do our ratio. We all kind of knew it was in the plan, added the plan, we knew it would spend down, but we got up to about 50, in the 50s.
Oh, the community center?
Community center, the funds we've been setting aside in our
Um,
5-year
And so
plan,
our general fund percentage the
Up to 50.
percent of total budget got to 50%.
it just grew. And we've been outside the 40 for a number of years because we knew that was in our plan.
Okay.
And we've had funds going to it now. This is, third year. We committed 2 million. 2 million was committed, and then another 300-some thousand, and now this 4 million.
But a number that John threw out just a minute ago, I think is very helpful with regard to understanding our future flexibility, and that is, I think what you said was, $1 million is about 5% of fund balance, right?
That's a good-
So if you watch our fund balance projections out there, you can look at 2023, almost 45%. That's almost 15% of leeway, or about $3 million that can cover comprehensive
Under library.
plan
Whatever.
challenges or opportunities, and/or library or other things as well.
Right.
Yeah.
And I always beat this drum. Fund balance is a one-time source of
Yeah.
source. It's a one-time source to do a one-time thing.
What do you mean by that?
For instance, if you said, well, we want to have a village-operated library, and it's gonna be $600,000 per year, you know, some excess fund balance would be gone in the first 2 years. Because it's only there one, that $9 million at the end is a one,
Would
if
be
you say I
a
want
good
to
use
use.
of fund balance.
It's
That's
like
not
taking
capital,
your-
it'd be more of a capital expense you'd want to do. You want to do capital.
It's like
Correct.
taking your savings account to either pay for the remodel, like you might can pay for the remodel, but you've got the monthly mortgage and the electric
So
bill.
fund balance is a good, if you said, we want to use some of our fund balance, it's great to build sidewalks. It's a one-time thing, it goes away. But if you said, we want to fund operating a library, perpetuity, and it's going to take $600,000.
Would probably require a tax rate change.
Probably be a tax increase, because that's a recurring revenue source.
Or a reprioritization of other things that we're, they say we're not doing.
Of other operating expenditures.
So for capital expenses, that's where that's,
It's the most, it's a suitable,
it has a real asset, yeah.
best use of that.
Okay.
And I know, I don't want to get down too much of a rabbit trail, but there's some reluctance to the state of North Carolina to allow us to have a rainy day capital fund. So we can, but we just can't separate it out.
Can't.
It's
That's
just has to be.
that's a GASB, all the way up to federal, yeah.
So I guess in order to stay within your parameters, and we're a relatively young municipality, 1980. There's capital expenditures we don't know about. I mean, just be honest, there's capital expenditures we don't know about.
Like what?
Yeah, you know, I think that could happen in over the next 5 to 10 years.
Well, I mean, you could
Yeah.
have a big wing, I mean,
And I'm just
the
saying,
population numbers you came up with might need a bigger community center.
at what point in the future should we increase that parameter, just so we have room to take advantage? Like, why, maybe it's 45.
You guys asked me
Oh,
that.
in terms of fund balance
Yeah.
policy.
I got asked that question, are you comfortable with where we are? I think Mr. Boldry asked me that
Yeah,
question.
yeah.
And I told you that at that time that it served us well. We haven't had any cash flow problems getting down to 30. You know, we've been, cash flow, we've been able to meet up, operate in that band. Our peers, however, are mostly in the 50 to 60 range. Our peer communities, Southern Pines, Cornelius, other towns that we benchmark against for financial measures, they're running a little higher. So there's nothing written in stone that 40 is a great cap. And again, that's why I made those comments about the 44 not being unrealistic with $1 million coming back from the library and maybe, you know, pressures to use that for that. There is a prescribed methodology in the governmental accounting standards to set aside fund balance. It has to stay in your general fund, though. They won't let you take it and stick it in your back pocket and hide it from the public. They're going to say, because we used to do that. We used to do that all the time. We had a capital project, a capital reserve fund. We'd sit over there and we'd say, the general fund has this number.
You can't do them anymore.
But you can, inside the general fund, you can commit it, and then we can have our own internal calculation, say for, you know, available fund balance, not including committed.
And it would
Kevin-
also take a lot of public education to do that, to
We
increase
could.
the fund balance. Here, I don't think without the public education, you really be tough.
Kevin, more to your point there, though, as John said, we are kind of below a lot of the peers that we look at, but the state no kidding requirement is like 8%. And we're not, none of us are gonna advocate for dropping 8%, but the bottom line is, if we had a real emergency, you know, you're talking about $6 million worth of, if you're at 40%, you got $6 million to cover emergency
An
expenses.
emergency.
And that's without incurring debt, which is another option, so.
Right. So we're in pretty good
And you
shape.
wouldn't do both at the same time, but I'm just saying
And it's
there's,
it's timing and availability. Like, if we had an emergency, you know, a FEMA emergency, and we needed to spend $1 million, which I've seen that in my career, you know, you go to this fund for that. When does it hit, you know? August, when we're below these numbers, because that's when our cash flow is really, September, you know, between June 30 and September 20 is when we're really spending with no money coming in, very little money coming in. So, it depends on the timing of when those things happen.
Right.
And
In fact, at times that we were lower than this, we suspended capital spending until.
We have.
You couldn't go out and do any capital spending until like October 1st or.
Until tax revenue started
Got
coming
it.
in the door.
Mm-hmm.
Just from a cash
Smart.
flow.
I just needed to understand that.
Yeah, we've
Very
had to do
smart.
that.
Yep, very smart.
And while I understand the blip in the percent of total budget here, at 44%, whatever that is, 44.8, 45. I mean, because of the uncertainty with the library, I mean, it seems to me I would advocate for leaving it where it is and not bringing it into the general fund. Just to keep these numbers a little bit more without having this blip next year.
We can't leave it where it is.
We don't have any choice.
Per contract, it has to come back.
But I thought that decision point was next year.
It is June 30, 2019. The trustee must return the funds to the village if they don't meet the.
Unless you strike a different deal with them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so I would just say, not knowing everything that we don't know yet, but knowing that something will change, it just would seem to me more prudent to leave that money where we have it, rather than bring it back into the general fund at this particular point in time. To me, that seems like a management decision that could go either way, right?
Yeah, if you wanted to keep it earmarked for library uses, it would contractually, the trustee doesn't have a choice. It has to come back. It would come back to us and you could commit it for another purpose. And then reduce it, and we back it out of these numbers and say, projected ending general fund balance, less committed fund balance, available fund balance.
For the
We have a
purpose of
new-
these budgeting documents too, I think we're kind of obligated to show it this way unless and until you enter into a different contractual arrangement that would recommit it.
Or if you commit it in your own, they could commit it in their own council meeting.
Why didn't you do it last year?
We didn't have this conversation last year.
Yeah, we didn't.
Oh, you mean it's coming
Wasn't
back?
coming back,
Yeah.
last year.
We didn't know if it was coming back.
Yeah, I mean,
Less certainty.
Now, I mean, we can say with almost absolute certainty that
It's coming
they are
back.
not going to raise the funds
right.
necessary to comply with the contract that $1 million was earmarked against.
I think we,
We could have subjectively made that call last year. It's not real, but it's certainly now, we've crossed that
I
threshold.
think a year ago, we thought the chance of the contract being fulfilled on the library's end, on the foundation's end, was low. Now we know it's lower. It's lower. So I think, as Jeff said, the uncertainty that this is going to be fulfilled, I think it's more certain now that it's not going to happen.
Yeah,
It's
right.
more certain it's not going to happen.
And I think that you're talking about the technical aspects, but in the spirit of what you're saying, I think there's agreement in our subcommittee that,
For it to come back
Yeah.
into your hands,
but
into
the
your.
technical aspects doesn't, as long as we control where it goes, it doesn't matter.
Okay, all right, move on.
Please.
All right. Moving ahead back to our agenda, that's the forecast, capital improvement plan. Again, this is just more detail on the 5-year capital. If you turn to 145, there's, at the bottom there, general, impact of the CIP, you can see what's happening in each of the 5 years to come up with this $11.9 million 5-year capital plan. And the largest item there is in 19, the community center. Now you'll notice we're not showing the whole $4.4 million cost because some of it has been expended in FY18.
Right.
This is the impact. The general fund's going to pick up that. The rest of it is all general fund expenditures, fleet, information technology, and other capital additions across the plan. And then you'll see also operating impact is not exclusively for the community center, but for all significant capital items, we have to put in the operating costs. There's very little beyond the community center at this point, but there is some. So that's the 5-year capital plan. I'll just give you some highlights here on page 148. You have as we've talked about, the capital project fund, community center. And then on 149, we start the detail list by the 5-year. You've seen the capital earlier in the general fund, which was 1 year of capital. This is kind of the 5-year.
This has a little bit more of what you were looking for, Judy, I think, for the,
Oh, yeah, okay.
yeah, the page
148.
148.
Well, that's true, it does.
It does, yeah. All right.
So that is now 149. You can start to see the fleet purchase plan for 5 years. When is equipment going to get replaced? Now, we also prepared for you today, Judy, you had asked to see like numbers of equipment in each department.
Yeah,
And so we made a list. The list here hides items that aren't being replaced in the 5 years. So
Okay.
we've got a list that shows everything. It just made it a lot
net,
longer.
net cars.
It's all the cars.
Like you said, how many cars are in the police department? This will show you that information. We prepared that for you today so everybody can see that.
And the thing about this too, if it's a new piece of equipment or new software, like if you were looking at the streets and grounds, that sewer back trailer and the skid steer, we always mark them as new right here. So if you see that year column and you see it marked new, that's an expansion of our fleet or our major equipment.
At the end there, yeah.
Okay, got it.
Okay.
The year shows the year it was purchased.
Purchase.
And you're depreciating
And then the useful life.
based on that. What, and the useful life is here, okay.
The life.
What's GP?
And some of those
Great point.
life numbers are, take them with a grain of salt, because
Software.
we're not convinced they're right.
Oh, great.
What numbers, Jeff, what numbers?
Life.
The useful life numbers there in the third column.
So you really, okay, so that's interesting. You're capitalizing software?
Not
It's
so much
generally
anymore.
accepted
Yeah.
accounting principles required us to at the time
Some.
of purchase, yes.
Really?
Not much
Not
anymore.
ages ago,
Most
yeah.
now is cloud-based.
Operating expense, yeah, yeah.
That's why we got to say, why are we spending so much less on IT capital? Right? Well, we're still spending the same amount or more, it's just in a
Operates
different
shifting,
place.
yeah,
It's
exactly.
in the cloud.
Okay, so that's the capital improvement. That is pretty much, let's see, flip one more page on your agenda. We got just a couple items, and I think I may have already covered, I think I've already covered these. I covered these off script.
Off script.
Yeah, so those are those things that, honestly, those are things that I felt were very important from a financial advisor perspective to you guys, that we look at these numbers, and you may be, some folks may say, oh, your fund balance is outside your adopted range in the 5th year. And I think, yeah, but we're also, as a community, facing some unknowns. And we're working through those as best we can as a community. But we want to be financially prepared and prudent that we're able to meet those. We believe this plan, as proposed, is prepared to do that.
So item C up there, additional items, is this just like a footnote? There could be additional items? We
That's
haven't
it.
specified.
No, that's what I was saying. We're at 44%, 39 if you commit the $1 million to another library project.
Right,
And yet we don't know. We've set aside some money. We've set aside that sidewalk or pedestrian facilities funds,
Okay.
1.2 million. However, we don't really know what the comp plan will come forward with. We put a lot of things on that parking list. We said, oh, let the comp plan tell us, let the comp plan
Oh, we
tell us
did.
what to do. So some of those will be coming back.
right. And so, but we don't have a,
Capital expenditures.
but we don't have a dollar.
We don't,
We
they're
do
not,
not have a
Right,
dollar.
because they're not quantified.
Yeah, exactly.
We don't know what they are
We don't
yet.
know what it is,
Yeah.
exactly. So this is just the potential.
Like for your
evolution.
constituents, though, you say, why are we adopting a 5-year plan that puts us near the top or just outside the top? And say, well, these are the reasons. There's some things on the horizon that are big ticket that
Right.
may come into play, so.
Okay.
Okay,
That's
did,
long-range comp plan was three pennies
On the tax
on
rate.
the tax rate. The council decided to raise the tax rate by 3 pennies in order to increase resurfacing, build greenways, and do comp work.
I think that was the first
It
comp
was the
plan.
first comp
Yeah, because
plan.
I wasn't here. Yeah.
Resurfacing greenways and what else?
That was the first comp plan, which is in like 2003.
Stormwater, we weren't paying.
Long
We
ago.
didn't allocate money for stormwater projects.
That was a long time ago.
So in 2003, we added 3 cents, and then the next one, did we?
We didn't.
No,
It
okay.
was-
And what I was told is when all of the comp plan recommendations. Is that me? When all the comp plan recommendations were done, they took the 3 cents off.
We did reduce it.
They reduced it 3 cents. They said, we need this for this express thing, and then when they were all done, they took it.
Sunsetted it, that's all.
Yeah, they did. That was
That's a good
awesome.
precedent.
That was a good precedent, yeah.
Congratulate yourself.
Maybe we could do something like that for the library. But there would be ongoing operational costs.
Operating costs, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, well, yeah, we just have to sort it out. Because a combination of what you did to stock away money for the community center is certainly viable.
Sure is.
And also, and just looking at you know, how much of our margin, I call this margin, but, that we want to eat into.
Well, there was two things on the community center. There was dealing with the capital expenditure and then over a long period of time, dealing with the operating expenses. So that's the same exercise.
Yeah.
To do.
And along the way, we had a lot
Totally
of,
separate.
Yeah.
along the way, we had a lot of one-time windfalls. We just didn't spend some money here or there, and we continually just set it aside.
Yeah, I mean, it's a rainy day.
Right.
But I think the difference too is the Rex program at least has some income coming toward it.
And the operating expenses are a lot less than.
The library will have some, but not nearly as much.
Maybe, have you discussed yet that if any of the endowment money would come with the library?
It's up in the air.
Yeah, it's not a lot of money.
There's more questions than
In
answers.
terms
right
of what's
now.
available for annual operating expenses, it's a drop in the bucket.
Yeah.
Really difficult to talk about.
I mean, if you look at,
There's too many questions and not enough answers.
yeah,
Yeah.
if you just look at Southern Pines as a model, not necessarily our model,
Yeah.
you know, but they spend what, their budget's like $900,000 a year
Exactly.
for their library. No, exactly, but I'm not saying, but
Yeah.
it's just, and we're spending $500,000. Audrey's spending $500,000 in the library.
I think their IT is under the library in Southern Pines as well, so there's some funds
Yeah,
that are
I-
wrapped up in there.
And you know, I don't agree that they're spending $500,000, so. So that's, yeah.
I'm going to ask a question. Do you feel that we adequately address what you asked us to address with the budget that we presented?
Yes, I do.
I do too.
And are there any changes to numbers? John and Brooke and I are all three over here taking notes about changes to text and graphs and charts and stuff. But in terms of what's funded or included, are there any changes?
I got a silly thing. We're using an updated picture on the community center instead of the one with the parking lot on the right. So use
Yeah, we
updated
can update a
photos,
picture, yeah.
updated
Yeah.
photos,
We didn't
illustration.
have them when we went to print.
Make sure you update all illustrations to match
Okay.
changes to, nothing substantial, but. And then I was real interested in talking about the long-term side of it. We talked about a little bit, but we have another meeting. What, long-term of the whole budgeting process, it's like the question I asked John on the fund balance, the whole long-term aspect.
So do you want to have another meeting on Wednesday?
Well, I didn't know, I thought it was planned, I didn't understand that. Yeah, I didn't know it could not happen, that's fine with me too.
If you want to ask John about long-term, I mean, you can ask him, or, and if there's something that we all need to know.
Well, my issue was more as a newbie, this one-year budget is a function of 5 years of work, you know, I think, you know. And so in order to make an impact as a new person, I gotta think more long-term. Media, that's kind of all the perspective I'm trying to, so I really wanted to understand more of the long-term implications, because that's,
Knowing you'll be here for a long
yeah,
time.
yeah.
Than some of us.
And John and I both, I mean, and Brooke as well, I mean, we're happy to meet with any council member individually to
Yeah.
I think that's.
Kevin, are
give
you-
some detail, or if the two
I'm
council
happy
members.
with it.
Individual questions.
Yeah, I mean, I need more individual remedial time. Yeah.
But do you feel that this document addresses what we have asked the staff to do?
I honestly don't know. I mean, I'm going to assume yes, but I really have a better context for things now. But I still think, I don't know how to get at some of the answers that I have questions about. And I haven't, maybe after this, I can go back and put together what I think the numbers are. You guys can tell me yay or nay. I'd like to come visit you on Wednesday at 2.
Do that individually, because, you know, I think that as far as another meeting on Wednesday, really,
I think,
I would like to go.
I'm sorry?
There's a few more that I would like to go to. And I think we've covered just about everything.
Well,
I'm ready to approve this budget, I'm talking about long-term stuff.
but if Judy has concerns that result in requests for changes, I think we need you all to get together again.
Will we know that by Wednesday?
Can you get the questions before Wednesday meeting?
We're going to have a public meeting on this, so there's going to be changes.
Yeah,
There is
we're
a
looking
up-
at
Your
that,
questions
I mean,
answered before.
yeah, hopefully so. And then, I mean, like, you know, the birdie that was going to look at police cars, you know, putting that in as well as all the other things that you're looking at, so that I understand what
Birdie's
could be on
left
the
over.
horizon. But the big stuff is in here, right? The
The big thing for us is, are there number changes?
So far, I haven't heard any
It's-
dollar change.
Yeah, is.
Other edits are easy.
100,000 here,
Yeah.
or take away, 50,000 here. That's where we need to make sure we have enough time to
So- so I-
run through and
I have none,
changes through
just to
it.
answer
So I
for
guess
me.
I have one that is somewhat specific, but I don't think it'll be
Okay.
gigantic number difference. So in the commercial streetscape enhancements, improvements along Magnolia and McCaskill roads. So you all were talking about McCaskill opposite Linda's Pinehurst Cafe, right? I don't see the virtue of putting brick sidewalks on that side of McCaskill.
Okay.
For a couple of reasons. I mean, yes, the brewery's going to change things on Magnolia, so I think that's terrific to come down Magnolia, because you've got them on the opposite side. But I think that coming out of the comp plan, there might be things that tell us, we've all, the village place ideas are out there.
Correct.
And so,
That's not money that we absolutely have to spend.
yeah, so
It's not budget,
So
it's
it's
just
earmarked,
it's
but
a-
can be changed to,
it's a projection, it's not a budget.
it's a projection.
Yeah.
And
It's
so,
outside of this fiscal.
It's outside year one anyway.
because I think you're
That's
right.
what you're
I think it could change.
yeah.
And there's a statement in the CIP that says,
Yeah.
for the out years, now 2019, that is the budget, and we're planning to move forward with
But
stuff in
it says
2019.
0 right here.
Right, 2019.
Zero for
But in the
next year.
future years, it says,
It says 115,000, 46, and a total of 131.5
So you
over
could
5.
have the comp plan, say, for example, finish up, and then you say that 115 needs to go down Rattlesnake Trail
Yeah.
instead of.
And that particular project is actually in the last 2 years of what you're seeing there, it's
Yeah.
not, so it's because 22 and 23, I think.
And we have this process to approve that budget.
yeah, on page 143, there's, at the bottom of the introduction section, it says, adoption of the CIP of the village council does not constitute a commitment to fund a particular item, but rather signifies council's intention to fund capital expenditures at the indicated level during the 5 years. Capital investment shown in 19 of the CIP, however, does represent an amount of capital expend that's appropriated. So,
But so, I'm just gonna make stuff up, but let's say this is in streets, you guys, but let's say that we end up deciding that we need to do an addition on the community center, so now it needs to go to Parks and Recreation, that 131.5, that's not a problem.
No.
It doesn't have to stay
Next
within
year,
that.
That's just
just-
change of plans.
you just
Yeah,
move it.
right, okay.
Intent
Or
today.
New direction
No
and
different than
retreat and
resurface more roads, whatever.
absolutely.
You're not adopting that plan as
A plan.
a plan.
No, I get that, as long as there's room to re-swizzle.
There is. And that's why we have a retreat.
Even if it was a budget for this year, you could come back mid-year and say, we changed our mind, let's reallocate some things.
The previous council's not bound by,
Yeah,
So what about,
right,
future council's not bound by that.
that's true, yeah.
Plays all into that.
so we're gonna do 20 additional neighborhood streetlights this year, and we're gonna do 5 miles of resurfacing. But is that the total miles of resurfacing?
Maybe, maybe not.
It depends.
It's an estimate.
Petroleum prices.
It's a
No,
framework.
no,
No, right, you might end up with less if
yeah,
prices
more.
go up. Yeah.
or more.
We treated 5.1.
With the slurry seal,
Well,
we're probably gonna go over 5 this
We
year,
did 5.66 this current year,
yeah,
Okay,
including the slurry seal,
including the slurry seal.
which is,
But then again, the long term keeps playing.
And we're adding,
Yeah.
basically $200,000 to that.
bouncing around $70 a barrel, so
Yeah, and that really
Oh,
makes a
that's
big
good.
difference.
I'm related to that. That's a good.
Yeah.
point.
that's, yeah,
it is, yeah.
those exogenous factors, okay.
Yeah, we can definitely.
But so this is where there's a disconnect. So you did 5.66 miles this year. You're adding money, but next year you're only gonna do 5 miles of resurfacing?
Sometimes it's like that, depending on the projects and the cost of the
No, if your
materials.
goal is 5, then that's not incremental. Do you
It
do you get
depends
that
on
disconnect?
the slurry seal versus full depth reclamation, where you're having to dig up the pavement in a certain area because it's so bad. It just, It just depends on the road and
Condition.
what
So-
Yeah,
condition.
it's misnamed, it's called resurfacing, but it's rebuilding a road.
It's a-
In some cases, yeah.
In some cases.
And in the opposite end of that extreme is this slurry seal, where we're really not, I mean, it's
But
a marginal upgrade. We're taking really pretty good road surfaces and kind of topping them off again. And so it's, it's very cheap, but you're not making a huge impact on that road segment either.
Okay, but you said you're gonna, an additional $200,000 in resurfacing funding and 70 for road patching, additional. So now, if I tell
Additional
the
dollars.
citizen, additional dollars, so if I tell people, well, last year we did 5.66, and this year we're gonna do 5 miles,
It's more expensive this year. If that's the result, that's why it would have happened.
so if we,
It's a projection. The 5 is a projection.
Okay, so-
We're guessing 5s based on,
so you gave me a metric I can use for
I'll go
General
on
funds.
Tuesday.
Wednesday.
Excuse me,
Yeah.
Wednesday when we'll come, we have all the projections for the actual number of miles and everything.
Well, yeah, so if you just
We
give
can
me a
show you all
ROM,
that.
I'll take a ROM on that.
yeah,
So
the
I
other,
can-
What would it hurt to project more, just to a point?
nothing.
I mean, I'm just saying,
Yeah.
our intent, this framework is about our intent. If our intent is to do 8 and we only do 5,
Our goal, Kevin, has been to do 5 on a 5-year rolling average,
5-year rolling
recognizing that
average.
price spikes up and down. Our
so that's
capital-
the
We do a
answer.
5-year
Our
rolling
capital
That's the answer, it's
expenditure
embedded in
has
a
been
5-year plan. Yeah.
Year in and year
But
out.
then what's
our expenditures
additional?
have
If you're
been-
gonna still stick with that? I mean, that seems like a bait and switch.
We've been back and forth.
Well, I mean, for illustration purposes, we had a good year last year, we did 5.8 something. The year before that, I think we did about 3, right?
Yeah.
With the same amount of resources, we did 3, and that's what we're trying to account for, is that it's the
doing
cost
3.
of doing
It's
business.
more about not doing 3.
Well, so last year, 2 years, you did an average of 4, and now this year we're gonna do 5.
Well,
I
we
mean,
used
I'm
to-
just trying to have the
Yeah.
story
The-
that
the
goes
other-
with
The other
words.
component that comes into play there is we don't know right now the ratio between the big expensive resurfacing dollars
Righto.
and the slurry seal dollars either. We're still
Right.
working through that.
Detail, okay.
Yeah, so it may be that we'll end up at, 6.1, or it might be we end up at 4.8.
Mhm.
All will depend, of course, on pricing that comes back.
Yeah.
And we are seeing some pretty significant spikes, from what we understand, in resurfacing material.
So my only suggestion is for the public hearing that we need an answer that meshes with incremental dollars yields incremental miles.
I hear you, and I think the
It does
answer
sound-
is more about.
Judy, it just doesn't work that way.
But wait a minute, there is an
Yeah.
answer, but it's in the long term. What Jeff
It's in the
said about the
front.
long term, you're dealing with a problem long term, and you're dedicating more resources to it. And that should equate into over a long term, over time. So I think it's a long-term problem. We're trying to give them an answer in a 12-month period, and it's hard.
I mean, we can make we can make another step.
There's nothing wrong with that
It's just
element of
right
detail.
now, the 5 miles is what we've been trying to maintain over an
26%
average of
increase.
5 years.
So all I can say is that it will be received as half a loaf, the way, what I'm hearing today that people are getting. And I think, I would say that we maybe need to look at putting more money toward it.
Well, if we focus our attention, we're increasing our road resurfacing and patching by 26% next year. That's a commitment. In the old days, we had let's try to hit 5 miles every year. And then you have that philosophy versus let's invest $900,000 a year. Okay, so dollar cost averaging, if you do $900,000 a year, in the years when petroleum is cheap, you're gonna get a lot more roads resurfaced.
We all
And in
understand
the
that. We
expensive
fill up our
years,
tanks.
you'll buy
Yeah,
less.
we get it.
You'll buy less.
Yeah.
And you also you're funded with a property tax and sales tax that are static.
But
So it's hard to go, so we're gonna get 5 miles every year and go up 300,000 this year and then down 300,000 the next year with the.
And not really know what it's gonna
Plus, if you
fall
tell a
out.
long-term story, you'll tell, 2 years ago, you only did 3. That will really tell the story, too.
See, I
Yeah.
think that's the part of it too.
Yeah,
It's like in
yeah.
the last 2 years, we averaged 4.
Yeah, I
Well, what are the last 3 years worth?
Just tell the
Just
long-term
tell-
story.
tell- What has been the norm in the past?
Yeah.
What are we trying to do for the future?
Yep.
Yeah.
But we can't guarantee, I'd rather
But-
do 6 and have told people we're going to do.
I did it.
You didn't do good last year.
I mean,
Well, I don't know where the money's going to come from. Where do you want to take money from?
Maybe focus on the dollar commitment, We're committing $270,000 more, 26% more.
but I think they need to know what they get for it.
Yeah.
You know,
In
that,
a long-term frame, so maybe here's the
Won't
last
we know
5
more
years.
at the end of this year, for next year? In other words, I agree with her.
Probably get fairly
We can-
close now if we apply just the resurfacing dollars and just the slurry dollars, but I just don't know what the mix is going to be. I don't know if we're going to do 70% resurfacing, 30% slurry, or 10, 90, or 80, 20. We haven't picked those roads yet and picked that program yet.
But you have your past spending
Oh, yeah.
and
the
outcomes.
history, yeah.
You
Yeah.
have what, and I think that will
10
help
years,
you
I'll
here.
tell you.
That will help you here.
I mean, there's a spreadsheet
Yeah. Yeah.
on the internet that
I think that's the way it's
gives
gonna
you
have to be
the rolling
tackled.
average.
It's
Yep.
gotta be a long one. I'm coming down.
I've scheduled it. I'll be here. I'll probably ask the same long-term questions. I'm done with this.
The rookies are coming.
Why don't we, because we
partner in
have the
crime.
room reserved, let's just meet in here, just as planned with.
Like a
the
work
two.
session
And we'll
done.
try
Lauren, can you cancel the
As long as we don't have majority council members, that we can cancel,
So it's
we
just,
can cancel
like, just
it.
two, right?
two?
Yeah.
Are you going?
Cancel the meeting.
I'm going to ask questions on long-term stuff, not even about this one.
I'll send my questions.
You gonna, Judy, you said you want to send yours in advance? Is that what you
I'm
just
gonna
said?
try to.
Okay, that'd be,
Yeah, tomorrow.
I'll even try to send my long-term questions.
Yeah, I mean,
If, you know, I'll try to do
that
that.
way we can.
if we can pull stuff together.
It's more about me being
Thank you
new.
very much for all of that detail, all the
You're
things that we
welcome.
don't know.
Been good.
Helpful.
Did you gavel the adjournment yet?
I don't either.
We're leaving, we're leaving.
Okay.
I'm late.